pleased to see so many of you here today. It's wonderful. And so thanks all for coming. And I hope you managed to get from the conference whatever it is that you're looking for. And I've got a pretty good idea what that might be. I'm really chuffed also to see so many doctors here today. This is a new thing for TPA, and so many alternative practitioners. So, you know, hopefully they're here because they're realising that not everything in the garden is as rosy as it should be. And we all know, those of us who have been left suffering, it certainly is not. I'd also like to thank those of you who have donated raffle prizes. So if you haven't already done so, do check the raffle prizes out, and please buy a ticket because we're trying to raise funding, you know, to help us to carry on with our campaigning work. There's books for sale by Dr. Kendrick, Dr. Skinner, and also TPA. We've got our book £3 cheaper than usual at £7, and it's the Thyroid Problems TPA guidebook. And I can assure you that more or less everything that you need to know about thyroid problems is in there. If you haven't joined our forum, our online forum, I would highly recommend you do that too, because any questions you've got, almost certainly somebody will come and be able to answer them. So many of us, we know, are unable to get the help and support that we need from the NHS. So these groups of ours are absolutely essential. Also, you'll save yourself a lot of frustration and anger, and also a lot of money as well, because there's organisations like Genova Diagnostics who will do tests for you that are outside the NHS, tests that the NHS just say they can't do. And Nutri Limited, for instance, will give TPA members 33% discount on any supplements that you might need. So that is really excellent. Also, TPA makes, I'm making a point of this, that TPA doesn't make any charges for registration. I've had a lot of people coming and saying to me, you know, how much is it to join TPA? We don't honestly believe in charging, because so many people have been left really into back and ruin by the NHS, that there's organisations like ours where it's the only place you can actually get help and support, well, in Thyroid UK, in the UK. So I just don't know where people would be if there weren't organisations like this. I mean, look how many of you have attended here today, and you're not attending here because everything is fine. You should imagine that the majority of you have got problems, or on the doctor's side and the alternative practitioner's side. I hope that you'll be able to learn a lot more that you didn't know about, you know, about all the different associated conditions that go along with being hypothyroid. So we've got some great doctors waiting to speak to you today. So I'm not going to talk for long, honestly, I promise. But if I see any of you starting to nod off, well then I'll know, you know, enough is enough. Sadly, this is our first conference without our beloved Dr. Gordon Skinner. He's attended every single conference we've ever had, bar one, and he forgot all about that, and he went off to sunny Spain and played golf. But we forgave him for that. Dr. Skinner was one great doctor, like doctors here, who was just brilliant, you know. I mean, he stuck his head above the parapet, as you all know, with his many and various being brought before the GMC. And this was all to get justice for all of you who have been left suffering. He would bend over backwards to do whatever it was that was needed. And we're going to miss him absolutely terribly. I doubt that any one of us who knew Gordon will ever forget the terrible shock of his passing. I know I never will. I remember at his Thanksgiving service in a tiny little church in Lapworth, that particular day there was a howling gale. I don't know if any of you can remember this. But, I mean, it was a howling gale to remember. It was on the news and people were being warned, do not go out today. You know, high-sided vehicles and all this, stay away from the roads. And I remember when Afshan, standing on a stool in order to appear above the top of the pulpit, began to pay her own special tribute to him, when at that very moment the wind roared and screamed so loud it shook that tiny church and completely drowned out her words. We all knew that wind was Gordon blowing his last trump. I hope he knows that the work that he started is continuing with a vengeance, and Afshan will be bringing to us an up-to-date account of all the details about this later. They're doing sterling work, so that's carrying on. A little update on some of the things TPA is involved in that you may not know about. But very quickly, for those who don't know what the thyroid gland does, is here in your neck, or how the thyroid function actually works, it's the body's accelerator. It produces two hormones, one called thyroxine, T4 for short, the other triiodothyronine, T3 for short. For those needing thyroid hormone replacement therapy, T4 is the one normally prescribed in the NHS, but T4 is mainly inactive. Yes, I said inactive. T4 has to be converted in the body to the active T3, but the trouble is not everybody can convert easily the T4 to T3 for a variety of reasons, which TPA recognises, but the NHS does not. The result is that many sufferers from symptoms of hypothyroidism are lumbered with a medication which not only doesn't work, it cannot work for them. And TPA is campaigning to find a better diagnosing and treatment protocol that will work for all of you. A few years ago, I don't know whether some of you will remember this, Owen Mitchell solicitors expressed an interest in our particular frustration with endocrinology and wondered if they could help. However, at that time, the biggest obstacle we had was money. We believe, however, that we are now in a position to be able to accept their legal advice and help, but more on that later. So, what are our challenges? First, effective diagnosis of symptoms of hypothyroidism, which condemns people to a basket of other disorders, such as depression, subfertility, heart disease, diabetes, etc., etc. And our second challenge, assuming a correct diagnosis, is inappropriate treatment for a large minority. The greatest problem we have is the fear that pervades the endocrinology specialty. The knowledge that should doctors dare to go outside of mainstream diagnosing and treatment protocol and treat their patients properly, their careers and livelihoods could be put at risk. Endocrinologists are being forced to listen to the RCP, who are guided by the British Thyroid Association. GPs are being forced to listen to endocrinologists who refuse to diagnose those who have normal thyroid function test results, but who, in reality, are shown to have symptoms of hypothyroidism if their case is addressed more correctly. But who is listening to the patient? As stated, our second challenge is inappropriate treatment for patients with symptoms of hypothyroidism. And I wish we had more time to explain why we have come to the conclusion that sufferers from such symptoms may only improve when they are investigated and treated outside of mainstream policy statements, and thanks to a growing number of practitioners out there who are seeing the light, and members of the British Society of Ecological Medicine who have found the need to practice outside of the NHS doing this. Please don't give up, please stay with us. What folk don't appreciate is that the Royal College of Physicians policy statement is only about the diagnosis and treatment of hypothyroidism, properly defined as a deficiency of secretion by the thyroid gland. And on the whole, for such a condition, their diagnosing and treatment protocol using T4 only works fine. However, there are reasons why a large minority remain ill on T4 only, but the RCP training curriculum omits any reference to this fact. They teach that all patients suffering hypothyroidism symptoms get well on T4, but they take no account of those patients who have a normally functioning thyroid gland, where the hormone being secreted by that gland is not getting into the cells where it does its work. So their statement that T4 only works for all is most definitely not true. If a patient continues to complain of symptoms, some doctors blame the patient, sending them on their way without a diagnosis, while others will give a diagnosis of ME, CFS, FM, or depression, etc., again sending them on their way with no treatment. Some, thanks to Professor Anthony Wheatman, even tell such patients, you're suffering with a functional somatoform disorder, meaning it's all in your head. And again send them on their way, shutting the door firmly behind them. TPA has written rebuttals to the RCP statement on the diagnosis and management of primary hypothyroidism and the British Thyroid Association statement on armour-thyroid versus thyroxine only, citing hundreds of references to research and studies, pointing out to them that their statements are not only misleading, some are downright incorrect. They have been asked to amend these statements not only by TPA, but by doctors, researchers and patients throughout the world, but they stubbornly refuse to take any action. The RCP and BTA et al. Will never admit they have been wrong, nor will they admit that the way their guidance has been enforced is causing harm to approximately 300,000 UK citizens. That is about 15% of the population suffering with thyroid-related problems, who are being unsuccessfully treated with T4 only. They will never admit they were wrong because they know such an admission could lead to claims for compensation from those whose lives have been wrecked by them, claims so huge they could probably bankrupt the NHS. We need to do something to stop this, and stop this now. Enough is enough. The president of the Royal College of Physicians eventually wrote to me and said, "We will not be entering into any further discussion regarding hypothyroidism," as though he thought such stern words would make me go away. No way. So where does that leave us, the patient? After everything we have done, putting our case forward to all thyroid associations, Department of Health, Royal College of Physicians, General Medical Council, Human Rights, etc., and being totally ignored by every single one of them, we have come to the conclusion that there is only one place left to go, and that is the courts. This is where Urban Mitchell enters the lists. Several local clinical commissioning groups are now refusing to fund the prescription of natural desiccated thyroid extract, even for those people who have had it prescribed within the NHS for 8 or more years. This is disastrous. The only advice CCGs are offering their patients is to talk to their GP. It just gets more and more ridiculous. Their doctors prescribed natural desiccated thyroid for their patients in the first place because they were unable to tolerate T4 only for whatever reason. Their intolerance of T4 hasn't changed. And for a doctor to put us back onto a hormone replacement that doesn't work, quite frankly, it could be a death sentence. Also, unbelievably, there are certain CCGs now refusing to fund the prescription of synthetic T3, liothyronine, anymore. The world has gone quite mad. We need some answers. First, they gave the excuse that T3 is dangerous and nobody needs it because T4 converts to T3 for everybody. Then they told us it's too costly, and boy, they can say that again. But with only one manufacturer of T3 in the UK, there's no competition, so say no more. Don't they know what T3 does? Don't they know that without T3 we die? These CCGs are responsible for deliberate harming of patients in total contradiction of their legal responsibilities under the NHS Act of Parliament. Under that Act, they are required to put patients first and foremost, but they have failed to do so, and disastrously so. The Department of Health knows what is happening, yet they close both eyes and ears and don't want to know. Their decisions make no sense. The more I research, the more frustrated I become, as it appears that the RCP, the British Thyroid Association, and the so-called Masters of Endocrinology, NICE, the MHRA, or the CCGs have little idea what they're doing. Looking through the 2006 NHS Act of Parliament, it seems though that the CCGs are damned if they do and damned if they don't. For example, what's the CCG supposed to do when it is written in the Act, Section 14U, that CCGs have legal duties to promote the involvement of patients and their carers in their decisions made about healthcare services. And then, under Section 14V, it states, CCGs also have a legal duty to act with a view to enabling patients to make choices with respect to aspects of healthcare services provided to them. Okay, so now we know all CCs have specific legal requirements to put patient care first and foremost. This is brilliant, absolutely great. But then all that goes by the way with yet another precise legal requirement by them in the snappily titled NHS Procurement, Patient Choice and Competition Regulation 2015, which states, CCGs also have precise legal procurement obligations which require CCGs to take decisions concerning the placing of healthcare contracts in accordance with a specific set of factors guiding the decision, meaning the CCGs must give priorities to economics. Pardon? So if CCGs do take patients' wishes into account, first and foremost, they will then potentially act outside of the framework for decision-making under the 2013 regulations. Why has nobody brought this to the attention of the powers that be? Does nobody actually care? Having found this, it is something that needs to be addressed, and very urgently. So CCGs refusing to fund the prescription of natural desiccated thyroid are not only removing valid consent via this unilateral demand, they are also advocating changing medical therapy analysis without even seeing or talking to the patient. So who is benefiting here? The patient or the doctor? Worse, CCGs are breaking rules set down by the GNC and their prescribing guidance that categorically states, before you prescribe for a patient via telephone, video link or online, you must satisfy yourself that you can make an adequate assessment, establish a dialogue and obtain the patient's consent consent in accordance with the guidance. Really? So, back to Owen Mitchell. Only 2 weeks ago, I sent to them no less than 12 pages of evidence to show where the CCGs are wrong, and cited 246 references to back such evidence in the hope that they will be able to get to the bottom of why so many patients suffering hypothyroid symptoms are being harmed. It is absolutely crazy. We have a member whose local CCG has refused to fund NDT because she has been using very successfully for the past 4 years. She is totally intolerant of synthetic T4 and T3, even the pure liquid versions. In fact, she nearly died during this period of being prescribed synthetic hormones only. She also qualifies for legal aid, and thank God for that, because this is one case we're hoping to take forward. Should this case go ahead and we do win, this could set a precedent, but we will have to wait a little while yet. I truly feel that those doctors who are seeking to improve their knowledge about thyroid disease, wanting nothing other than to better serve their patients, who have now found themselves put into a situation where they are understandably afraid that should they dare diagnose and treat outside of mainstream guidance, they run the risk of losing their career and livelihood. Because of the technicality of diagnosis and treatment, this topic may not interest everyone, but if it does interest you, and you would like to be involved in putting an end to the present status quo, TPA would be happy to start a technical workshop and see where this leads us. This could take the form of questions and answers devoted to the limitations of diagnosis and treatment of the symptoms of hypothyroidism, not just hypothyroidism. TPA can look into the feasibility of such a project, so if you feel that you have something to contribute or would like to know more, check our website in the not too distant future or contact me privately. I will make a brief mention here of how TPA may assist interested doctors who find themselves really between a rock and a hard place when it comes to diagnosing and treating such patients. Indeed, finding themselves no longer being able to manage their thyroid patients as they might wish. The current unsatisfactory situation is that if a doctor does not follow the official guidelines on the management of hypothyroidism, which means confining themselves to the unreliable TSH or free T4 tests, or venturing to prescribe natural desiccated thyroid or even synthetic T3, they are threatened with a GMC investigation. The same antagonism and debate about treatment of hypothyroid symptoms proceeds even more vigorously in the USA compared to the UK. Just as in the UK, there are official pronouncements on how hypothyroidism should be managed. In the USA, the FDA pronounces on such matters. Maybe a few of you have heard of a US phenomenon, Jonathan Emmons, a lawyer with an extensive US legal practice who has been given the name of the Dragon Slayer of the FDA, who has won more cases against erroneous FDA policies than any other lawyer. Oh, to get such a dragon slayer of the GMC here in the UK. Here is where I speak to our friendly doctors who have given up their precious time to attend our conference. Emmons has produced a document for doctors who wish to treat patients according to the merits of the case, is supported by official policy. He has produced a document entitled What to Do When the Licensing Board Investigator Shows Up, a Practitioner's Guide. I hope that having access to this document via the TPA website, it is actually now in preparation, will prepare you, if necessary, for an otherwise lonely and trying experience in practicing medicine as your heart tells you it should be practiced if you are ever challenged by the GMC. Emmons also wrote a paper for alternative medical practitioners called Medicare Part B, Problems and Solutions for Complementary Care Practitioners, with Todd A. Harrison, 1996. I could go on forever, but I am, like a lot of you, frustrated and angry at the huge number of patients being deliberately left to suffer. There is something very sinister as to why it is being allowed to continue. I'd better sign off because I get not only ticked off, but kicked off. However, let's end on some positive notes. Turning again to North America. Did you know that patient consultations with alternative medical practitioners now exceeds consultations with mainstream physicians and have done so for several years? Much of this focuses on thyroid and thyroid-related disease. The North American trend often predicts UK trends, and I look forward to a greater expression of that trend here in the UK. Further, there is now a massive array of internet forums on every imaginable medical topic. People are now, rightly, seeking information from self-educated subscribers to such forums and comparing experiences rather than from experts. It has been said that the most dangerous 6 words in the English language are, experts know what they are doing. Nobody can be more wrong than an expert. Despite the limitations and possible occasional danger of internet forum discussions, we are becoming informed e-patients, no less endangered than when following occasionally toxic mainstream medical advice. Additionally, a series of internet summits on such topics as thyroid disorder and cancer have attracted hundreds of thousands of internet attendees, and these are growing. In short, the stranglehold which currently determines the delivery of healthcare is loosening, and I can confidently say that we look forward to the gradual appearance of some sunnier days. On a different note, TPA is aware that more and more people are responding to our request for donations, some deciding to make regular donations to TPA. And for those who do, after this event, we wish to register a heartfelt thanks on behalf of everybody, and a huge thanks also to all of you who have donated a raffle prize, you know who you are, to help in funding our future campaigns. Those of you who have known us long enough will no doubt be amazed and delighted that we are, during the next week in May, completing our very, very long overdue business plan. This has come about because of the diligent work put in by our trustees and officers of our working party. We are at last moving forward at a pace. Having our business plan will enable us to apply for trust funding, which is needed to enable us to open several doors into future campaigning. Thank you all. I will now pass you over to Dr. Malcolm Kendrick, who is a GP and author living in Macclesfield. He believes strongly and passionately that the increasingly strident healthcare lobby is intent on scaring us all to death by issuing serious warnings about almost everything that moves. He's determined to bring some common sense into such insanity. So I give you Dr. Malcolm Kendrick.
Thank you very much indeed. I have my sign when things go wrong technically, wrong way around, that way around. So if I do this, then you know I'm in trouble. I think that the whole thyroid area is something I've become interested in recently. I am a GP. I'm here to say that a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sorry about that. I'll try and get better. But we are ruled. Unfortunately, the GMC is responsible to no one but Parliament. You can't do anything to the GMC. They are effectively a law unto themselves. Who you need to get at is really politicians in this case, because no one else is going to change this. Doctors aren't. The GMC certainly isn't. NICE won't, because the only people that NICE respond to is NICE. I've taken part in a couple of attempts to change NICE guidance and found that NICE rule on NICE guidance, and NICE always find that their guidance is correct, and that's that. So you have a lot of trouble doing this, getting at any of these people, because they're not really beholden to anybody, and I'm not quite sure how you do these things. So I do try to change behaviour. Very much I'm anti-expert, and in part that's what this talk's about. So I will start. I'll see how. I thought actually one of the doctors wasn't going to turn up, so I made my talk a wee bit longer, but now I maybe have to make it a bit shorter, so if I'm running over time, just drag me off. A lot of people have asked, why are you such a maverick? Why do you object to so many things? And I just start off by saying, well, my personal road to Damascus. Then I'd just like to talk about why a data doctor. There's a number of reasons for this. Everyone says it was all the pharmaceutical industry, they're all responsible for everything, and they're the evil empire. I don't think that's true. I think it's a whole series of different things. So I'm looking at the power of ideas, the desire to fit in, the power of the expert. Money is obviously important. And a very important thing, if mistakes are made, but not by me, whereby once people start getting things wrong, then they start trying to protect themselves, they protect their own reputation, and they become more and more aggressive because you're starting to threaten them. And then I just try and look at some of the ways that data are doctored. So one of the things that happened to me was being a little sausage out of the sausage medical machine. I believed everything I was told. I went to a conference where the first ever major study on lowering blood pressure was presented. It's called the MRC study, Medical Research Council. The main aim of this trial was to determine whether the drug treatment of mild hypertension in men and women aged 35 to 64 reduced the rates of stroke, death due to hypertension, and coronary events. I never quite understood that, because I thought that hypertension caused death due to stroke and coronary events. Therefore, that was death due to hypertension. But never mind. A lot of these things never make any sense. Anyway, there were 17,354 patients recruited over 5 years, 85,572 patient years of observation. Prior to this, there had never been a study on lowering blood pressure in people with mild to moderate hypertension, so no one actually knew if it worked. It was done, it was widely prescribed, and the results were, now I had to drag these out of the study because they never make them very clear. The total, and this remember, all these 58, 85,000 million people studied, the total number of fatal strokes was 18 in the blood pressure lowering medication arm and 27 in the placebo arm. Fatal coronary events are 106 in the blood pressure lowering arm, 97 in the placebo arm. So the total number of deaths from stroke and heart attack was 124 versus 124. There were 5 more deaths in the placebo arm due to aneurysms, which may be due to high blood pressure. But 5 deaths out of 85,000 years of observation is really just nothing. So, in my opinion, I thought, well, what's happened here? Well, this is surely just going to change everybody's ideas. This must make people think differently. We must be wrong. And actually, nothing happened. Everybody else at that conference sat down, nodded their heads, went away, and kept treating blood pressure. And I was left sitting sort of by myself thinking, where's everybody gone? Why am I the only person that seems to think, hold on, isn't that interesting? Shouldn't we be looking at that again? No. Now you may think that since this trial, all sorts of other trials have proved something different. They have not, by the way. What's subtly happened is they don't talk about heart disease deaths anymore, because lowering blood pressure does not have any impact on heart disease deaths. It does reduce certain forms of stroke a tiny bit, but the actual fractions are minute, and they don't even do placebo-controlled studies anymore because it's considered unethical to do so, because the benefits of lowering blood pressure are so widely proven that we shouldn't be not ever treating anybody. So we're now left in a weird situation where you will never know and never ever be able to study ever again if placebo is better or different than standard blood pressure lowering medications. As Winston Churchill said, men occasionally stumble over the truth, but most of them pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing had happened. I didn't pick myself up, I just sat there, and then from that moment on started questioning a lot more. So, look, moving on to the other data, why are data adopted? I think the power of ideas, and I just use a couple of quotes here. Why do people insist on defending their ideas and opinions with such ferocity? As if defending honour itself. What could be easier to change than an idea? Well, the reality is nothing is more difficult to change than an idea. I have given a speech like this before using these quotes, and I had a picture of the Twin Towers being blown up, and I said, that's what the power of ideas does. Those are fixed ideas. You try changing them. And a movie that I like called Inception, the most resilient parasite is an idea. You stick an idea in somebody's mind, it becomes trapped in there. So it's not, this is not just about money, it's not about experts, it's about how we all are. I do say to people, I try to put things in one of three places in my mind. Probable, possible, unlikely. Never true, never false. So I can always change my position on it. However, most people, it's black, it's white, it's good, it's bad, it's right, it's wrong. That's it. And I'm afraid that's not just something medics do, that's something we all do. But it's incredibly difficult to move. And there's a guy, Wilfred Trotter, who none of you have ever heard of. He was a British surgeon around about the Second World War time, talking about ideas. The mind likes a strange idea as little as the body likes a strange protein and resists it with similar energy. It would not perhaps be too fanciful to say that new idea is the most quickly acting antigen known to man. And this is true for all of us. I fight against it. When someone says to me they think statins are wonderful, I try not to say, you idiot, you're wrong, please go away. I go, well, let's think about it. And then I say, you're wrong. But I do try to think that people, we should do more of this. The trouble with experts is they are the most intransigent people in the world. Now, not only just because I think intelligent people get ideas and grip onto them really strongly sometimes, but also because it matters so much more to them. Because their whole world, if you're a thyroid expert, your world is the thyroid world, and if you want to attack that, you're attacking their world. You're attacking the basis on which they stand on the ground. So you have to be careful. And also in medicine it's particularly bad. This is a quote that I like. When I entered medicine, I didn't realise there was such an intense pressure to conform, but we learn early on that there's a decorum to medicine, a politeness. A hidden curriculum teaches us not to disturb the status quo. We are trained to defer to authority, not to question it. We depend on powerful individuals and organisations that are taught that success does not often come to those who ask uncomfortable questions or suggest new ways of providing care. Doctors are basically conservative, hugely conservative, hugely peer-controlled as well. They won't step out of line, except very occasionally. They go bah. They don't howl, they're not packs, they're sheep, they're herds. Many of us are, but doctors are terribly conformist. And then just, there's a chap writing in Circulation, Harold Krumholtz, who's actually the editor of Circulation. Well, I've heard of junior faculty who were told that questioning key assumptions of the field, even with evidence, would result in threats to funding and support. This is true. You don't question stuff. A note to my younger colleagues, be brave, to which I say to him, well, try being brave, and then the GMC comes down on you and teaches you that being brave has a very high price to be paid. And the power of the expert, this is from David Sackett, who set up the Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine, who says, according to the founder, this is him, experts are hindering the healthy advancement of science. Writing in this week's British Medical Journal, Canadian-based researcher David Sackett said that he would never again lecture, write or referee anything to do with evidence-based clinical practice, and he was the world expert. Sackett's not doing this because he's ceased to believe in evidence-based clinical practice, but as the BMJ comments, because he's worried about the power of experts in stifling new ideas and wants the retirement of experts to be made compulsory. Unfortunately, he's the only expert I know of who retired. And he's the only one that should not have retired, because he's the only one that knew the problems that come with being an expert. These people should just be, basically, you've got 5 years, then you're shot. Because none of them are ever going to retire or resign. Once you have that status and authority, you are not going to give it up. And that is a huge problem that we face. So all of these things kind of add together. But here's another problem. It's called money. It's not the only issue. What I want to make clear to people is, you know, I think salt intake is another nonsense area, for example. I think salt intake is perfectly healthy. In fact, we don't eat enough, we should eat more. And you can't eat too much. No, I don't think you can. I've seen 5 patients die of not eating enough salt. I've never seen a patient die of eating too much. Money. Here was it's a slide I used. You're told never to put more than 50 words on a slide. Well, I think I broke that rule by about 100 million. Couldn't get it all on. In 2004, this is what they call this cholesterol education treatment panel in the States decreed how many more statins should be used. Well, surprisingly enough, they thought everyone should be using statins. They were forced to reveal how many of them actually got funding from the pharmaceutical industry. Remember, there was 9 people on this committee. The top guy worked for the NIH, who couldn't be paid by the industry. And if you look, there's 107 financial conflicts of interest, 52 of which are directly from statin manufacturers. And this group is supposed to be telling us how we should be lowering cholesterol and how many statins we should be taking. Frankly, it's absolutely ridiculous. This could never happen in any other area. Can you imagine a lawyers or judges sitting in judgment and saying, oh, by the way, I'm being paid by British Aerospace and Lockheed Martin, and I'm deciding on contracts for weapons purchasing. They'd all be kicked out instantly, yet somehow or another doctors are considered to be above having any financial conflicts. What should happen, in my opinion, is this. What happens is nothing. If you don't declare conflicts, if you are conflicted, and then you're found out, and here is a little conflict, and there's another slide with too much information on it. Somebody did a paper looking at the association of low-density lipoprotein with the risk of cardiovascular events on patients treated with statins, a meta-analysis. Somebody said, and I wonder who it was, you know what, some of these people have not declared their conflicts of interest, and they were forced to reveal the conflicts of interest that they had. Now, if you look down here, Dr. Ridker was a board member of Merck, Sharp and Doe, who made statins, and he didn't tell anybody that he had a conflict of interest. That means he sat on the board of a company making statins. The rest of them, oh well, there was only another 64 conflicts of interest. Now, what happened to these people? In my opinion, they should all have been taken out and shot. What happened to them was nothing at all. They're all still writing and researching, nothing happened. So the punishment is nothing. So that's money. But the other thing is not admitting to mistakes. In medicine, it's quite a sensitive area. Now, I say in astrophysics, no one dies. If I say, black matter doesn't exist or whatever, that can make a debate, but no one's going to die unless it comes and lands on your head or something. In medicine, many can die, and I just used an example. I've used this in my book. It's called Strict Bed Rest After Myocardial Infarction. In 1912, Dr. James Harrogate published in the Journal of the American Medical Association the clinical features of sudden obstruction of the coronary arteries, first time described what you would call myocardial infarction or heart attack. In that article, he stated the importance of absolute bed rest for several days is clear post-infarction. I think it's interesting that you can diagnose a disease one day and the day after tell you how to treat it. By 1936, the patient is to be guarded by day and night nursing and helped in every way to avoid voluntary movement or effort. 6 weeks of strict bed rest was the treatment. Now, most people don't know this, but this went on for 50 years. I did a little calculation here, and you can argue the figures if you want. But this is a chap, Dr. Brownwood. He's a great old man of cardiovascular medicine in the States. He said after a few days, unfortunately, a few days became 6 weeks, with a 30% inpatient mortality for acute MI in his time. Basically, he arrived at the bed in the morning to take bloods and his patients had died. The inpatient mortality rate is now about 10%. It's reckoned about 50% of the reduction is due to medical advances, or perhaps getting rid of medical stupidity. So 30% inpatient mortality is now about 10%. About 10% of those deaths were caused by strict bed rest. That would be in the States 100,000 additional deaths per year in the USA alone, men only. We're looking at a period of about 45 years around the world. And discounting as far as I could, that's 15 million people. So the medical profession killed 15 million people at least, at the very least. Probably a lot more than that. That's more people than died in the First and Second World Wars combined. Right? These are quite large figures. I did a blog on somebody making up and falsifying evidence on use of beta blockers in the peri-operative period. And they estimate that over the last 15 years that has killed 800,000 people. That's their estimate written in the European Society of Cardiology. Because one man made up his research, that research became part of the guidelines. And the guidelines have potentially killed 800,000 people. People say to me, well, how doesn't anybody notice? Why didn't people notice? I said, well, how would you know? People had heart attacks, bed rest was the proper treatment, then they died. How could you know that they were dying because of your treatment or your stupidity? And this is one of the greatest problems that we have. As of course, what happened here, when did this stop? It stopped very suddenly and then it was forgotten, never to happen again. It actually happened because they put young men into bed for 6 weeks of strict bed rest because they thought astronauts would be resting for 6 weeks in space, what would happen to their cardiovascular system. And they found that their hearts became incredibly damaged. So they suddenly realised that getting elderly people with heart attacks to lie in bed for 6 weeks is not a very good idea. There was a hero of mine who actually tried to fight against this during the 50s. And at one point, because he said that patients after an MI should sit up and not lie in bed, students were told to carry coffins around his ward, shouting murderer. So I think ideas are very powerful, they're important to us all, we fight to maintain them. Experts have enormous influence and they will always support the status quo. Money is important, and in medicine admitting to mistakes can be too painful. I mean, Max Planck knew years ago that scientific ideas don't move forward fast. He was the man who published Albert Einstein's special theory of relativity. A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die. You don't change people's ideas easily, folks, it just doesn't happen. So I was looking a little bit at how data are manipulated, because there's so many techniques, and I'm probably not going to get through them all here, but one of the things that they can do, and this is Richard Smith, who edited the BMJ, he's written that almost a quarter of a century of editing to wake up what was happening, and all the papers that were being presented to him and he was publishing. Noting that it would be far too crude to possibly detectable for companies to fiddle directly with results, he suggested it was far more important to ask the right question. You can set up studies to get whatever answer you want. No one can ever see that you've done this. It's like a magician's trick. All the stuff happened before you knew it happened. So the trick itself looks impossible, but you didn't see that it had all been set up quite a long time in advance. Some of the things you can do, you can test your drug against a treatment that does not work or does not work very well. You can test your drug against too low or too high a dose of the comparison drug. You can publish the results of a single trial multiple times in different forms. And you can publish only those studies or parts of studies that are favourable to your drug and burying the rest. Recently, it has been shown that the studies on antidepressants, that every single negative study was never published, only the positive studies were. And that's been known for some time. The only reason that came about was because of a legal challenge in the United States. So, effectively, if you divide any number by zero, you get infinity. And when you publish nothing that's negative, and you refuse to publish it, now they say that they publish negative studies now, but they don't. And another thing that they do is they say peer review is this wonderful system that will mean that everything that's published is of the highest quality. This is Richard Horton, who's the editor of The Lancet, which is the #1 impact factor journal in medicine in the world. The mistake is to have thought that peer review is anything more than a crude means of discovering the acceptability, not the validity of a new finding. Editors and scientists alike insist on the pivotal importance of peer review. We portray it to the public as a quasi-sacred process that helps to make science our most objective truth teller. But we know that the system of peer review is biased, unjust, unaccountable, incomplete, easily fixed, often insulting, usually ignorant, occasionally foolish, and frequently wrong. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how research gets out into the public domain. And then you just don't publish data you don't like. Now, you may know Ben Goldacre's been trying to promote an all trials campaign to make sure if you do a trial, you've got to publish it no matter if it's negative, which is actually not happening. I do feel like you're in a situation like the government introduces new tax laws, and then there's all these tax lawyers who instantly have 10,000 ways of getting around them. You try drafting legislation that stops this happening, you can't. There's millions. Oh, it wasn't really a trial, it was a pre-trial trial, it was something else, it was bull. I could do it for you in 5 seconds. I could work out ways of not publishing anything you don't want to publish. The withholding of data has never been adequately dealt with. It's never been adequately dealt with. You may have heard that Roche, who've got this product called Tamiflu, osteovitamin, whatever it's called. It doesn't work, it's useless. But the government spent £1 billion on it. And you remember the swine flu terror that we had, where everyone had to have Tamiflu, and it was stockpiled. And anyway, Roche have refused to publish the results of this study. They've refused to let anyone look at it, and they're just running rings around any government trying to have a go at them. And governments cannot continue to ignore this international scandal. You know what, Ben? Government can't continue to ignore this scandal because they don't give us stuff. So I look at, say, something like the heart protection study, which we consider the most important statin-lowering study. Eligible patients who completed the pre-grant randomization run-in phase were randomly allocated to receive simvastatin or matching placebo. 60,000 people took part in the pre-randomization, only 20,000 took part. You cannot find out why 40,000 people were removed from the study. I'm guessing it was due to adverse effects, and they just said 20,000 had adverse effect, get rid of the other 20,000, gone. However, you can't find this data out. Rory Collins, who ran the HBS study, also holds all the data from the statin trials and the cholesterol trialist collaboration, CTT, and refuses to let anyone see the side effect or adverse effect data. Will not release it, you can't see it. People think I'm nuts when I say this. I've got an email trail where he has admitted that they will not let anybody else see any of their data. So if you have data you don't like, you don't publish it, you just don't let anyone look at it. And then say, I've got it, it's fine, don't worry. Off you go. Or you put it in strange places. Here's a huge study, 150,000 men and women, looking at the overall rate, looking at the cholesterol level and all-cause mortality. Now this is the biggest study that I've ever seen. In men and women under the age of 50 and in women from the age of 50 onwards, low cholesterol was significantly associated with all-cause mortality. In other words, the lower your cholesterol was, the more likely you were to die. That's true in all age groups, more particularly in women. Mainly due to deaths through cancer, liver disease and mental diseases. Mental diseases sort of means multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Huntington's, chorea, etc. Where was it published? You would think The Lancet, maybe not. Journal of Women's Health. Now, I have nothing against the Journal of Women's Health, but it is not a high-impact journal. They couldn't get it published in a high-level journal. You think that would be quite important? If you have low cholesterol level, you die younger than if you have high cholesterol levels. Consistent finding, by the way. You can find that in study after study. Or the Hunt-2 study done in Norway, 50,000 people over 15 years, all-cause mortality, in other words, how likely you are to die. This figure is of 1, that's an average, and they've set the figure of 1 at a cholesterol level below 5. As you can see, as your cholesterol goes up, as a woman, your death rate goes down. For men, it goes down, it goes up, but it's generally, you're less likely to die of anything when your cholesterol level is 7, greater than 7, than when it's below 5. Now I can find study after study like this. So obviously I write about this and I research this and I look at this stuff and I think, well, this is it. These are the figures. I can't find a single study from anywhere that shows that people with low cholesterol live longer. The reason I can't find it is because there aren't any, all right? And yet we are all told, oh my God, your cholesterol's high, you're going to die. No, your cholesterol's high, you're going to live. So the truth. And the point I want to make about this study is, I bet you've never heard of it. You've never seen this. It's never been on the front page of any newspaper. It's never been on the news. It is completely ignored, except by me. In fact, the authors of this study wrote to me and said, could you make some noise about this study? Because they couldn't get it published anywhere. 50,000 people over 15 years. Or you do another thing. This is a study, I'd just like to guess, this is a graph, mortality versus a variable. The variable being, have a guess as what that variable would be. One is the standard mortality, so you can see on the left-hand side we've got a mortality of 1.7, which means a 70% increased mortality rate, and we've got, whatever, 30% here, and that's 1, and that's a bit below 1. Any ideas what that is a graph of? You've read the book, you cheat. He's right. Body mass index below 18.5, mortality rate 170 or 1.7. Body mass index normal, standard mortality 1. Body mass index overweight, 20% reduction in mortality. Body mass index 30 to 35, 5% reduction in mortality. Now, I've blogged about this, you'll have seen this. Overweight people live longer than normal weight people.
Yes.
And it's justifying that. Now there may be reasons for this. There may be many reasons for it. One of which is if you get ill, if you're overweight, you've got more reserves, so you're more likely to survive the illness. That's a possibility. I can't find any study from anywhere where being overweight does anything other than make you live longer. There is no study. Yet you will never hear this. This never is ever publicated. That's not a word. I think I've invented a word. Publicated. Now, if you look at a study, this is a study done in the States, it says excess deaths associated with underweight, overweight and obesity. Aha, there's a study that contradicts what I've just stated, isn't it? If you read the paper, it says overweight was not associated with excess mortality. Now that's the title, that's the finding. There were actually, in this whole population, there's 86,000 less deaths in the overweight group than in the normal weight group. This is all of America, by the way. The authors of this study wrote to me recently after I did a blog criticising them for making the title of their paper completely incomprehensible and said, we didn't mean to mislead anybody. And I wrote back saying, well, you did. Oh, here's another one, a way of dealing with data. The meta-analysis, you've all heard of meta-analysis, to get all the data from all the studies and bring it together and multiply by 3 and take the number of inside leg measurements off and 1, 2, miss a few, 99, 100, as my daughter says. The efficacy of cholesterol lowering, this is in diabetes for using statins. As you can tell, I know this area quite well. 18,686 people with diabetes in 14 randomized trials of statins. Now, this was their meta-analysis done by this same group, the CTT, run by Rory Collins, Professor Sir Rory Collins, who doesn't like me and I don't like him. And he's not going to like Sunday because there will be another front page article on the Sunday Express slagging off statins. And that's who I was speaking to at lunchtime, was the editor of the Sunday Express. Now, they did this meta-analysis, so you think they get all the studies that have ever been done on statins in diabetes and look at them all, and you think, well, that's what they would do in a meta-analysis. Well, actually, there's only been 2 studies looking at the use of statins in diabetes alone. Most of these figures were taken out of other studies where the people had diabetes, which is not a good thing to do. So 2 large trials of statin therapy in people with diabetes have been reported. The atorvastatin study for prevention of coronary heart disease, the ASPEN study, and the coronary endpoints in non-insulin blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's called 4D, German Diabetes and Dialysis Study. They always have these cracking titles. Now, you'd think if a meta-analysis would consider these to be the most important studies to include. Since both of these trials reported unpromising results, in other words, they didn't show that statins worked, we considered whether their inclusion would have been likely to change our conclusion. So they didn't include them. And they ignored them. And I wrote to them and said, how did peer review allow this? Peer reviewers will allow anything if you're just saying stuff that they like. And they don't speak to me anymore, so I don't know what the conclusions are. I have to do it via journalists. I mean, luckily, the health editors of the Daily Mail, Sunday Express, Daily Telegraph, Sunday Times, etc., all speak to me quite a lot about this stuff. They all know that this is rubbish. But they cannot publish stuff because their editors won't let them. Another thing that happens is if you are a skeptic, you get attacked. Here's another terribly long thing. It's a letter written by Professor Castellane to Ufi Ravnaskov, who runs the international network of cholesterol skeptics, of whom I am a member. None of us who believe that cholesterol has anything to do with heart disease, and we are all researchers and professors and doctors and medics. So this is not, you're not allowed in unless you've got at least a PhD or a medical degree to this group. So we're not kind of, I wouldn't say that doesn't make us particularly special, but it allows us at least to have a certain authority when we speak. He has been against statins for years, and this is I've pulled bits out of this letter. If this was a joke, I could have laughed about your statements heartily, but they are in fact criminal, bordering on insane. This is what a professor wrote to Professor Dr. Ufi Ravnaskov. I completely contradict all of your ridiculous contentions. I insist you refrain from any advice to any patient anymore. You're lucky not to live in the Netherlands and have dragged you to court. Your nonsense is creating an anger in me that I've not experienced for a long time. Not very scientific. Although I did write to Castellane and said, stop writing this type of thing, it's not helping the discussion, and he did actually apologise to me. And Dr. Ravnaskov, again, I've had a lot of this stuff. I'm not putting up stuff against me because I've got tons of that I keep on file. But there's a thing called the NEGM is the New England Journal of Medicine, which is, along with the Lancet, it's one of the top journals. And there's a thing called Cardio Exchange where you can debate things. And basically he said, I'm writing on behalf of the editors of Cardio Exchange. Basically, we're not going to publish anything you put anymore. Go away. So that's how to get debate going. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to give you one more thing just to look at. which is an important one I just think for people to remember, because it's something I write about quite a lot. Another thing that they do is in medicine is to frighten you with relative risks. Relative risk versus absolute risk. Most people don't know what that is. I just want to give you 2 minutes on that. When I ask my fellow doctors what the difference is, they don't know either, by the way, so you're not in bad company. I've never spoken to a doctor yet who knows what the difference between relative and absolute risk is, because they can't explain it to me. So you treat 100 people with a blood pressure lowering agent for 1 year versus placebo. At the end of the study, 1 person dies in the treatment arm, 2 die in the placebo arm. The absolute risk reduction is 1%, the relative risk reduction is 1 versus 2 equals 50%. That's not very complicated, is it? No. Now you can keep doing that. You can do the study with 1,000 people. At the end of the study, 1 person dies in the treatment arm versus 2 in the placebo arm. Absolute risk reduction 0.1%, relative reduction 50%. You can keep going until you've got millions and millions and millions, all right? So when someone says we're reducing your risk of dying by 50%, what you have to say is, what was the risk in the first place? What was the absolute risk in the first place? All right? When it comes to statins, when they say 50% reduction, that could be, it's changed it from 1, really by 1 in 1,000. It could be 1 in 100. You don't know. There's no way of knowing. That figure means nothing. So when you see the results of a clinical study saying it reduces it by this or this risk goes up by that, ask yourself a very simple question: is this a relative or an absolute risk? And if you can't find out, the study, it will be relative. It can be ignored. So that's finished. That's really finished, but it's about just using that example. When they used rosuvastatin, they said a 48% reduction in stroke, 46% reduction in need for interventions, blah, blah, blah. That all sounded very fantastic and wonderful. But when you actually got to the figures, they were these. This is the same study, by the way. There were 68 MIs in the placebo group, 31 MIs in the statin group, 64 strokes in the statin group, 33 strokes in the statin group, 6, 9, 3, 6, 3. So the total number of deaths in the placebo arm was 12, and the total number of deaths in the statin arm was 12. And that is presented to you as a 48% reduction in risk from cardiovascular disease. That is one of the ways that data are manipulated, ladies and gentlemen. And that will be the end. Thank you.
Dr. Peatfield was very impressed by the work of Dr. Broder Barnes in the USA, and he visited the Barnes Foundation, returning to the UK determined to improve the lot of patients with thyroid disease. He's also author of The Great Thyroid Scandal and Your Thyroid and How to Keep It Healthy, to give readers an understanding of how the thyroid and adrenals function, to enable readers to play a knowledgeable part in the management of their treatment. I would highly recommend that if you are being badly diagnosed or given no diagnosis for your symptoms and being badly treated or given no treatment, that this is the one book you will come to use as your Bible. That I can promise you. If you are lucky, you might win the book as a raffle prize. So there's one book, there's actually 2 books, but I haven't received one yet. So I give you Dr. Barry Durrant-Peatfield.
Many of you know, some years ago, I wrote The Great Thyroid Scandal, which she has referred to, and how you can survive it. I thought the time is long overdue for a sequel to this about surviving adrenal illness and why it affects thyroid illness and health so much, which is what today's talk's about. It is no less a scandal, perhaps even more so. And even more extraordinary is the astonishing success of doctors, and I include endocrinologists in this, to not look for adrenal fatigue, not diagnose it, and not treat it. Since it is closely related to thyroid insufficiency, and many of the symptoms and signs of this, most of us here recognise without any difficulty, an uncountable number of people are condemned to years and years of illness, lack of interest, grossly inadequate treatment, and endless despair of ever getting well again. and all due to a lack of understanding of an illness which has become an evil handmaiden of thyroid problems. It's not so much that the knowledge isn't there, it's the total refusal to even consider the possibility, or look for it, or listen to what their patients are saying. This is the disgrace, and it's this that we have to learn about today, so that the doctors and endocrinologists can be confronted with this diagnostic and treatment failure. It's not rocket science, it's really quite easy. So let's get on with it. All right, a few basics first. Now we'll just find the right button. Yes. The adrenal glands are quite small, about walnut size, and sit on top of our kidneys, though have no connection with them. Their task is to ensure our survival when our environment challenges us with a massive, long-term threat, so that our system is able to provide a response which may save our lives. We can recognise two situations where this response is essential. One is where we may have to get out of trouble pretty damn quick. For example, when the gentle cow turns out to be not a cow at all, but a very cross bull, and we need to get lost at once. We need to run off and get out of the field, like now, perhaps over the hedge. The central nervous system, recognising the danger, ensures the immediate production of adrenaline and noradrenaline from the adrenal medulla, the inside of the gland. These incredible hormones stimulate enormously increased nervous and muscular activity, increase our breathing and blood flow through our muscles and heart, and so suddenly that our muscle and energy production doubles and trebles. We can run and jump and leap to safety in a manner never thought possible, and perhaps leave the enraged bovine standing. This, of course, is fight and flight. What a brilliant mechanism is this. It doesn't last very long, but we're safe. We have coped with a sudden and decisive threat to our survival. We're breathing violently, our heart is pounding, we're pale, perhaps trembling with the adrenaline flow, but we're safe. And all this done by the inside of the adrenals, the medulla, is pretty well immediate. Well, mostly we know about this, of course. But the adrenals have another big and crucial purpose. Their outer rim, the cortex, is multi-layered and can produce a whole range of different hormones whose job is to enable us to cope with a different sort of environmental challenge. These are lower key, lasting not a few minutes, but perhaps for hours or days. Something's going on, and our systems have to ensure that whatever the threat is, we have the right hormones to cope with it. So the circulation is increased to where it's needed. Glucose is made available. Hormones and electrolytes are secreted. Our nervous system is raised up to the challenge of DEFCON 1. So the adrenal cortex produces cortisone, other hormones like DHEA and pregnenolone, aldosterone, corticosteroid, to provide the wherewithal to make all sorts of adjustments to enable us to deal with the challenge of stress and illness and injury. Any illness or stress situation will produce this response to ensure our survival and to deal with non-emergency situations and cope with longer-term stress. This is what the adrenals do and can do for hours or days or weeks. But they have another fundamental role to play, which is what deeply concerns us today. This is their connection with thyroid function. Let's go back a bit. Hooked, the thyroid, as we all know, produces not one thyroid hormone, but 5. The chief one is thyroxine, which controls our energy and metabolism and growth. This is a molecule of the amino acid tyrosine, which turns into thyroxine, fundamental in controlling our energy production and metabolism. Hooked onto this thymine molecule are 4 atoms of iodine, which is why we need iodine. So is made levothyroxine. Now thyroxine, T4 for short, is actually a precursor hormone. This means that it really doesn't do anything very much, which is a bit of a blow. What happens is this: thyroxine is made and released into circulation, where it's passed round the body waiting the call of duty. If the cells of the body need to produce or release energy, structures within the cells called mitochondria are activated, not by the thyroxine directly, but by a different, altered thyroid molecule, one where one of the 4 iodine atoms has been removed by deiodination, and so turned into a different thyroid molecule with 1 less iodine atom, and called liothyronine, then T3. This is the thyroid hormone that does the business of regulating the activity of the cells. This works in every single cell: muscle cells, nerve cells, skin, fat, bone. Thyroxine does actually very little of this. It's down to the T3. This applies to all of us and animals as well. So thyroxine is not much good until it loses the 4th iodine atom. Now just hold on to that. For the thyroxine to change into the T3 form, an enzyme system is released, mostly by the liver. There are the 3,5-deiodinase enzymes. They all basically work the same way, but each of the 3 target different tissues. But they remove the 4th iodine atom, making the T3. And here's the killer. They use the adrenal cortex hormones as cofactors to do this conversion of the 4 iodine thyroid hormone to the 3 iodine form. They also turn thyronine into other thyroid hormones like T3 and T2 and T1, which have a lesser role to play in our metabolic processes. For interest, the 5th one instead is calcitonin. So there have to be the adrenal cortex hormones ready so as to make the T3. So what happens if the adrenal cortex hormones are actually weak or not there? Exactly. You can now see why the T4 to T3 conversion may not work properly, sometimes not at all. So that's why weak adrenals mean less T4 to T3 conversion. You can have lots of thyroxine, but can't make T3 properly out of it if the adrenal cortex hormones aren't working properly. That's why weak adrenal function means that low thyroid hormone T3, even though there's enough thyroxine there, you don't make enough T3. Or even if you're given T4. Sometimes these conversion enzymes themselves stop working, even if adrenal hormones are there. This is a scenario where you may have to be given T3 already made. Sadly, as we know, doctors won't test for T3 these days, and if they do, certainly won't prescribe it for their patients. And if they do require T3, the laboratory may not do it, even at gunpoint. No wonder weakened adrenal hormones cause such problems with thyroxine. So now we must look at why the adrenal hormones get into trouble in the first place. This is just to remind us how the thyroglobulin is formed, turned into tyrosine, and turned into the active thyroid hormones. And that's the conversion we just talked about. And there's the adrenal medulla. First we'll consider the adrenal medulla, the inside of the gland. This part doesn't concern us directly, but for the purposes of this lecture, we certainly need to know about it. As we learned earlier, the inside makes the adrenaline and noradrenaline, which fires up our heart and muscle energy consumption for the fight or flight. Well, of course, it can go wrong in two ways. It can run down and not produce these fight or flight hormones. This may happen quite slowly because the adrenal circulation may be damaged for various reasons we'll come to, and as part of a progressive adrenal fatigue. If it was part of a general rundown and illness, we become less able to respond to the situations needing an adrenaline reaction, which might not of itself especially bother us, but we become aware that we're not good in the department dealing with stress, and we are aware of weakened adrenals anyway. But the adrenal medulla can also go the other way. The tissues producing the adrenaline can start to overact and overgrow, so that we produce more of the adrenal hormones than we should, and more often and for longer. This overgrowth situation is actually not very common at all. I think I've only seen 3 or 4. It's pretty devastating. For little or no reason, you get an adrenal surge. Heart rate, blood pressure goes up. You get the turning over tummy and become terrified and anxious. A whole bit of a panic attack. What's happened is that the medulla, where the adrenaline comes from, has developed a growth called a pheochromocytoma, which fires off when it thinks it will. Difficulty is, if life and troubles have made us anxious and easily upset, a panic attack is just what might happen sometimes. But it doesn't mean you've got the fear thing, because some of us get panic attacks easily. It's if the panic attacks come without warning, and for no reason, we have to think about this as the cause of a panic attack. To decide, you're taken into hospital, and these hormones measured in your urine, say, over 24 hours. There are sudden peaks, then the diagnosis is made. It's quite simple, just have it took out. Panic attacks, because you have become naturally anxious over time, may seem quite similar, and of course are much more common. You'll be given beta blockers, things like propranolol, with calmer downers, like Valium, and perhaps counselling. It's only if these things don't work that the alternatives to be thought about. We now have to look at problems with the adrenal cortex, we're most interested in. Here too, you can get the adrenals going overactive. So they go the other way, or they go the other way and weaken into underactivity. The alternative, overactive situation first. This happens when the growth starts in the adrenal cortex, and as they do, produces an excess of these hormones. This, as you may know, is Cushing's disease. Such a tumour produces mostly cortisone, there are the others as well, and you get too much of them and you start to swell up. You get water retention, you get big stretch marks, blood pressure goes up, and you get a real funny shape. Usually you can see such a patient coming through the door. Now all these things happen if you're given extra cortisone, as for arthritis or colitis, asthma. So people like that onto a particularly rare site. If you've been given too much cortisone, the treatment is obvious. If not, then the Cushing's tumour can be removed surgically. It's the next section that I want you to pay careful attention to. If for any reason your adrenal cortex stops working, we have the opposite of Cushing's. This is Addison's disease, first described in 1855. You see from the slide, what slide, that the adrenal cortex actually has 3 layers. Indeed, yes, indeed. The outer layer, the zona glomerulosa, produces the mineral corticoids, represented chiefly by aldosterone. This regulates fluid and electrolyte balance by promoting the retention of sodium and the loss of potassium in the bloodstream. The next layer, the zona fasciculata, produces glucocorticoids, mostly cortisol, but also cortisone. The active hormone is cortisol. The glucocorticoids have 2 main effects. One is the ability to mobilize and form glucose from non-sugar sources like fats and proteins. The other is to maintain the muscle tone of the arterial system, vascular system, which of course regulates the blood pressure. In this way, glucocorticoids work in the body to protect from long-term, moderate and chronic stress. On the last layer, the zona reticularis produces sex hormones, an anabolic steroid, that is androgens and estrogen. The anabolic steroids are represented by dihydroepiandrosterone, DHEA, and androstenedione. Androgens have the most important role in promoting growth and repair of body tissue, especially muscle tissue, as well as their obvious purpose, keeping men male. The zona reticularis layer is weakened by the passage of time. Then its hormones decline until they're running at a fraction of the output we had in our youth. The reason this is such a minefield is that Addison's can be total, fairly bad, not too bad, or intermittent. It may quite easily be treated if it's recognised, or not treated at all if it isn't. Most doctors consider your actual Addison's disease is a terminal event, which it certainly can be, and there are no degrees of severity. So you either got it or you haven't, and then the only options are hospital or nothing. With the adrenal failure of Addison's disease, the adrenal cortex hormones wind down, your blood pressure drops, all your energy fades out, you feel cold, can't think straight, you may well collapse. And all of this may keep coming and going, so you never know quite where you are. If it's a sudden or acute episode, to restore things, you must have the missing hormones, especially cortisone. The other adrenal hormones, DHEA and pregnenolone. Aldosterone, androstenedione, corticosteroid are needed as well. You need sugar, you need salt and electrolytes and full cardiovascular support. For example, if you have one of these sort of collapses at home, you finish up in A&E. With a good shot of cortisone, salt, saline drip, sweet drinks and warmth, you recover, perhaps in minutes. Because you're better, you may be sent home, undiagnosed, told that it was a faint. This is how hospitals often see Addison's. An episode of collapse, followed by swift recovery. But today, we have to talk about not total adrenal collapse, but degrees of failure, often over time, which may come and go. This is adrenal fatigue. It's this which makes us chronically ill, and it's this which prevents thyroid hormone working properly. It's the chronic adrenal fatigue we must recognise and learn to tackle. So, we come right down to it. Why does it happen, and what can be done about it. We saw that the adrenal cortex deals with chronic low-key stress episodes, but also sudden collapses. This is real illness, like the chronic illness of badly treated hypothyroidism. But of course there are other lower-key stresses we all have to deal with: constant worrying, ghastly job, horrible husband, and on top of all this, we're chronically unwell with thyroid disease. So the adrenal cortex is continually having to cope and may eventually get tired and exhausted. It's this state of chronic adrenal exhaustion we have to recognise and treat. And it's this which causes persistent failure of thyroid treatment. To explain why this should be so, I want to broaden the scope of the thyroid illness a little bit as part of the progressive things about adrenal fatigue. When considering thyroid illness and treatment, especially unsatisfactory treatment, we have several things to think about. One, is the thyroid hormone dose right? Was it just based on the last blood test? Is the synthetic thyroxine working? Would not a natural thyroid work better? 3, are the adrenal glands fully supported? Is the T4 to T3 conversion working? Are there food intolerances interfering? Is Candida present? Are there other hormone imbalances? The presence of adrenal fatigue is going to be the big one, most important ongoing issue, and must be considered above all else. So let's revert to our adrenal worries. How are we to check them out? First, why does the adrenal cortex go wrong? Well, there are several reasons. Causes of failure: 1, you may have been a bit late in the queue when they were handing out adrenal glands at your birth. This congenital weakness may be because they're actually a bit small. It's called familial hyperplasia. But sometimes the complex enzymic pathway within them doesn't work quite right, and the right hormones don't get made. Failure of the 5-3 deadenase enzyme. The deficiency may only show up as you get older, and the adrenals have to work that much harder. The insufficiency then starts to show, perhaps in your teens. We know about the effect of autoantibodies on the thyroid. Well, they can go for the adrenal glands as well and progressively damage them. Severe illness and consequent adrenal stress may leave a state of permanent deficiency or exhaustion. Operation, accidents, real bad illnesses, glandular fever can all do this. Prolonged low-key illness, for example hypothyroidism or chronic infection, can eventually wear them down. Obstetric disorders are a common cause of permanent damage. For example, you were never quite the same after the major childbirth problem you had. You can see there are all sorts of reasons why they go wrong. So the next question is diagnosis. A high index of suspicion will have been aroused by the long period of illness. Poor response to thyroid treatment. A state of permanent low metabolism. It does need to be thought about, and doctors may not do this, so you have to remind them. Look at all these symptoms you've got there. You'll recognise some of them as thyroid, of course, but what a lot of other symptoms there are too. And when you come to look at the patient, these are the things one looks for. Some of you who've seen me will remember that I made you stand up and see whether you fell over. What your Achilles reflexes were like. I noticed the dark rings under your eyes. Perhaps you were complaining of breathlessness, losing hair if you're a man under your legs. You've got cold hands and feet, thin dry skin. You may have pigmentation, loss of body hair, unstable pupillary reflex, where you look at it, put a light in your eye, and your pupil does this, instead of just clamping shut. Poor response to thyroxine, rise of pulse on standing. And then you've got to diagnose it. Well, that's possibly my job, but as it's not too difficult, these are things you can look at yourself. You sort of list the symptoms and signs you've got. You do the Raglan sign, and that is whether his blood pressure drops or goes up when you stand up. Your adrenal stress index is the test, and the serum cortisol we test. So, as a doctor, there are a number of symptoms and signs one can look for. Low blood pressure is one, dizziness, postural hypertension, that is, your blood pressure drops when you stand up, pallor, pigmentation, dark circles. Doctors may be persuaded to check morning cortisol levels and do the synaptin test, where you're given an injection of ACTH, which stimulates your adrenals, which the body uses to make the adrenals work. Blood tests are used to assess the response. This test only seems to work, though, if you have actual Addison's disease, and it's often misinterpreted. I'm mentioning this because the general adaptation syndrome is a sort of line of what happens. You start, and then you get worse and worse, and finally you get exhausted. I don't use the term much these days. So to check it all out, you have some adrenal function tests. Now, the doctors may do a serum cortisol or the synaptin test. They may do the ACTH. What they won't do probably is the adrenal stress profile. This is an example of adrenal stress profile. Notice that the levels of adrenal hormones are quite good at the beginning of the day, but flatten out at the end of the day, and that the DHA is really rather low. There's another one where the cortisone is really quite low, and we often do this test, and the DHA is quite low as well. And there's another one showing actual adrenal exhaustion, where the whole thing is hardly working at all. So what do we do to help? Well, this comes under the heading of adrenal stress management. This means that everything possible is done to reduce the cause of adrenal stress. Firstly, we must reduce external stress, lifestyle changes where possible, avoidance of emotional, work or financial stress is obvious. Cutting down exposure to television and computer screens is often helpful. Going to bed early, 10 o'clock, follow natural biorhythms when melatonin switches off our system. Help is essential when sleep is a real problem. Melatonin and valerian may be of some use. And then there's the nutritional support that you can apply. Vitamin C, adrenals love. Licorice roots are being ginseng, vitamin B5, B and B6. Coenzyme Q10, vitamin D, and make sure the potassium salt's enough. So providing additional support, we have things like, some of you heard perhaps, adrenal rebuilder, adrenal dynamite, Nutriadrenal, Nutriadrenal extra. I use these quite a lot. Now these are natural. They're actually glandular sourced and contain mostly from New Zealand, all the adrenal hormones that you actually need but can't make yourself. You should have a proper, healthful, organic diet without the stress of chemical or toxic exposure, without consideration of food allergies. The avoidance of long periods of fasting is desirable. One should eat perhaps 4 times a day. There are certainly foodstuffs which can help the adrenal glands. And how are we doing? What, already? Here, you can talk. But I mean, just stop. You just stood up. All right. I talked about the glandulars. Many of you know about these. These are the adrenal support synthetics. Most of you know about hydrocortisone, prednisolone, DHA, 7-keto DHA. These can all be used but I prefer to use natural things. Okay, well, I very much prefer natural things, of course. And we've mentioned the NACs, adrenal cortex, bioidentical hydrocortisone. We get these mostly from Nutri Limited, and Sheila knows them, and I know them. Very good outfit, and we'll provide these on simple request. I think the natural preparations are better than the synthetic, but sometimes you have to use both together. So the program is this. If you have been ill with thyroid issues for some time, you must consider the role of tired and exhausted adrenals playing. I have to say that this seems to be an increasing problem, and less considered by doctors. Read about it as much as you can. Don't be put off by being told it's your age and you're depressed. You can test your adrenal status. Usual NHS tests are really very little help, and doctors don't usually see adrenal exhaustion as a problem. The tests, and these are actually arranged almost daily, and TPA will tell you what to do. Remember too that you may only get T4 and a TSH done on your national health. These can be misleading in adrenal fatigue, because there may be lots of thyroxine present, but with your rotten adrenals, you can't use it properly. So the levels look all right because it's building up unused. You'll be horrified to learn how often this happens. You need the 24-hour urinary thyroid hormone, also may be helpful. So let's quickly summarise the indications where adrenal support might be needed. 1. Where abnormally low DHA and normally high cortisol may come up. Many symptoms and classical signs, noticeably possible hypertension, suggest weak adrenal support. We may find that the cortisol is particularly low and the adrenal DHA low as well. In thyroid deficiency, state has been present some considerable time, so you're getting anxious about it. Previous treatment with thyroxine has been unsuccessful, or even worsened the situation. There has been thyroid third surgery or radioactive thyroid ablation. Thyroid blood tests are normal, but the patient is obviously hypothyroid. Previous major surgery or trauma from an accident or light event. If you're going to be brave and treat yourself, TPA will help you. You must stop the thyroid replacement for about 7 to 10 days to reduce the unused thyroxine before you start the natural adrenal glandular replacement. Build this up gently and then restart the thyroid, best of course in the natural form. You may need less than before. Even if you've been poorly some time, everybody gets hugely better. Sometimes a lot of damage has been done, so you have to go slowly. You must learn about it. Sheila and I are always ready. You must keep a good record of what you're doing. This means morning and evening temperatures and pulse rates, how you are, marked out of 10 for wellness. There must be a feedback between what you're doing and your response. Now, I think that's all I had to say. Is it all I had to say? Yes, it was. Okay. That's perhaps worth mentioning, isn't it? Your approach to treatment. That's it. Well, thanks for your attention, all of you. And Sheila and I are here to help. Thank you very much.
Just been asked as a presentation on a website. It isn't, but I can put it on. I do have a blog called drmalcolmkendrick.org. I'll ask the chap who kind of runs it to see if he can put it up there, and so it should be available to be seen there. All right? So there's another question. Sorry.
I'm taking the natural desiccated thyroid from Peter in Thailand, and I'm wondering if that's equivalent to the American one, ARMA.
You'll have to ask somebody else that question because I don't know the answer to that. It'd probably be better for Sheila to answer that.
Yes. The only difference is in the thyroid, Thyroid, and Thyroid S, is that they're the generic versions, not brand names. They have different fillers to make your thyroid and Armour thyroid, but they work just as well. A lot of people would say better. I know that the majority of our members are actually taking Thyroid or Thyroid S.
And that's from Thailand.
That's from Thailand.
Yes, yes.
And you can't get them on prescription, you have to get them private.
Yes, yes.
But they work very, very well. Otherwise, our members just would not carry on taking them.
Right, okay.
So,
lovely, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Have you had any experience of looking at some of the thyroid medication studies, particularly around combined treatment and NDT? And have you any view on the statistical validity of those?
I've been having a look at some of the studies since I've become involved in looking at the thyroid area. The problem that I have is a bit in the whole, doctoring data area, is I don't really know what's been published, how much has not been published, and how much the studies have been manipulated. I tend to spend quite a lot of time looking into things in a bit more depth before saying, yeah, I'm absolutely certain one way or the other. The problem in this area is so much of the data on combined thyroid is being written with a purpose, should we say. So I'm slightly uncertain at the moment. I'd have to say I'm trying to learn a bit more at the moment, but my own view of speaking to some patients recently is that definitely there are improvements in people from taking combined thyroid, and that just is a fact. It seems to be. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Marion, and you have spoken to me on the forum, because I'm one of the trustees. But what I wanted to ask you is, you said we've got all this doctoring of data, and it's clearly going on with the thyroid situation. How do we tackle it then? Because in that sense your talk was quite depressing, because it's such a difficult thing to deal with if everybody is ranged against us. How do we deal with it?
Well, I do think in this case your best bet is to go through the political route, personally. I think individual patient who... A truth in the United Kingdom is that if 20 people write to their MP about the subject, the MP then has to take that forward to the... there's a group within the government, I can't remember what they're called, who then have to take that seriously. There is a trigger number of letters. So if you can get 20 people in a constituency to write to an MP, and if you can achieve that in 4 or 5 constituencies, you will have an impact on government. And then it will become more possible to then have a meeting with, say, an Undersecretary of Health or whatever. I think in this case, because there's a lot of patients are objecting and are suffering, that's the sort of thing that politicians become quite interested in. I honestly think in this case this would be the most effective route to go through. I don't think you'll get through on the scientific Royal College of Physicians, NICE. GMC has nothing to do with this, by the way. They just enforce the rules. So the rules are set by the RCP in this case and NICE. The CCGs follow the rules. You can't argue with them. They will not be able to, because National Health, NHS England is the group that runs the CCGs. NHS England tells the CCGs what to do. CCGs have virtually no autonomy whatsoever. And if the NHS England will follow what NICE says. So you have to get the RCP, NICE and NHS England, but none of those people will listen to you currently. So you have to do, in this case, is probably go through the political route. And I would suggest that's your best bet, frankly. I do suggest that's the best bet. If that's fine, anyone else anything they wish to ask? Or I will answer questions. Well, not yet, no. I'm not that good. I could do it while I'm talking to you. So there's a question at the back.
I went to my gynaecologist yesterday and asked him about DHEA for myself, and he said, you don't measure it in men, and even if you found me to be low in DHEA, it's not something that we would provide any medication for or supplement. Is that right?
fairly predictable response, I've got to say. You're going to have to get it yourself. Because there's plenty of websites you can get it from. If he won't give it to you, no one else will, I don't suppose. The other question is, what actually is your testosterone? It might be quite low. If it's quite low, your doctor might be persuaded to give you testosterone cream. But giving you DHA, I've just never known them do it, I'm afraid. Sorry.
I will carry on with the introduction of Dr. Chandy at the moment because we've still got quite a lot to get through. Dr. Chandy has been a GP in Horden, County Durham for more than 13 years. He was awarded the Glory of India Award for research using vitamin B12 and to treat fatigue syndrome. Yes, here in the UK, he has not only been ordered to stop prescribing the treatment, the medical practitioners and tribunal services interim orders panel have not only told him that he must not treat B12 deficiency, but also NICE have declared there is insufficient evidence to support a recommendation to prescribe B12. Yet they dare to admit that some sufferers have reported health benefits from it. As we in good old Yorkshire would say, heave by gum. What is going on? The world really has gone quite mad. But Dr. Chandy believes, as we all do, that the Masters of Medicine will one day learn that he is right. Along with the Gloria of India Award, Dr. Chandy has also met Prime Minister David Cameron at 10 Downing Street to discuss his work linking fatigue syndromes and vitamin B12 deficiency, and we are very proud to have him here with us today. Dr. Chandy.
Hello everyone. As you know, I am a general practitioner in Horden for 45 years, and prior to that a pediatrician for 3 years in the hospitals. So almost 48 years I've been serving the NHS without a break. Last evening I was doing my evening surgery, and of course I spent quite a bit of time for patients who want to talk to me. So it only finished by about 7:45. So I came home, and I thought, my God, I haven't done any preparation for today to get those leaflets and things like that parceled and put it in the boot of the car. When I finished, I thought I must go to bed. Then something prompted me to open the computer. So I went on the computer, and then there is an email from one of the patients whose husband has emailed me. As you know, we set up a charity to help people, and I give clinical advice over the internet or telephone, or even sometimes in person. So I get this email on 18th of March from this lady, from Essex. I have stumbled across your website and really hoping you can help me. Can you please advise if there is anywhere in Essex or London, UK, that I can go for a private B12 and possible D injection and testing? I am praying you can offer advice of someone I can pay to see, as no one is going to listen to me. I am in the process of trying to change GPs also, as not happy in general. I talked to her, I telephoned her and emailed her, sent me some more information, which she did. Dear Dr. Chandy, I must thank you for your amazing response. I am very stressed. I have changed GP and still got the same response at the second surgery. As I say, I changed GP and now seeing the fourth. I am scared to self-inject without someone showing me. I would rather go officially through the medical system, as I am very concerned about doing things on my own. But I think I am going to get no choice if I want to get better. My address is such and such, because I will post the B12 solution to her. Second email, other than knowing my own My twin had injections. Her twin was already having B12 injections. I didn't even know B12 was serious and could be causing my symptoms till a week or two ago. It is awful. I don't understand what is going wrong with the health service. Thank you for your time. So I wrote to her, I've been a GP for 45 years, therefore you are in safe hands. I was trying to reassure her, you're not with the irresponsible doctor. Writing and telephoning her each day. I hope a good night's sleep makes you feel better. By that time I developed a severe flu and she realized it, and now she's advising me. I hope a good night's sleep makes you feel better. I thank you for your call tonight. You speak a lot of wisdom. I wish you well from this flu. I feel so ashamed of myself. I do not know if it is hormonal or what is wrong with me. My whole personality has changed. This is all happening in a matter of weeks. Thank you for your kindness. God bless you. Sorry, Dr. Chandy, I hope you are feeling better today and the flu is on its way out. I hope you are feeling well now. That is dated 12th April. I unfortunately have been ill myself, but hopefully the sun will now kill the germs. Thank you so much for sending me the 30 ml B12. I sent her the 5,000 microgram instead of 1,000 microgram because I knew she was seriously ill. Thank you so much for sending me the 30 ml bottle of B12. I shall certainly leave a donation on PayPal for the charity. Unfortunately, I have not yet sourced anyone to help me, showing me how to inject. See how some people struggle. On the 12th of April, immediately I emailed her, try not to stress yourself. I may have a chat with you to reassure you soon. I thought I must ring her and have a chat and reassure her. So last night at 11 o'clock when I opened the computer, hi Dr. Chandy, my name is Adam. I'm the husband of the patient. It is of great regret that I have to inform you that Karen has taken her own life as she should not cope any longer. Thank you for your time and kind words you had for her. Let us pray. She is at peace now. This is the sort of thing you face. Why is this happening in our NHS? In your NHS? I can't understand. Let me just show you this photograph. Can you all see it? Yeah. This young lady, I have known the whole family, 3 or 4 generations. I have known her from when she was born. Very smart, intelligent, active girl. Now, I am restricted by the GMC that I shouldn't even talk B12 or cortisol. Then otherwise I will be suspended. And of course there are people who sometimes want to inform them. So this lady developed severe pain on her left side and she started to limp. So she went to the urgent care center, local urgent care center, for immediate attention. They gave her some painkillers and said, go away. Next week, because she was getting worse, she was taken to the same urgent care center. And again the following week, more painkillers, more pregabalin and gabapentin or whatever, all toxic medications for a 17-year-old. Then she decided to come to my practice and saw one of my colleagues. Of course, they all know about my work. So he didn't even ask her why she is limping and why she's got one crutch. Even he didn't bother to get out of his chair and examine her. instead ordered some blood tests, routine blood tests. But the blood test didn't even include B12. It should be done according to the protocol you have seen. That's the practice protocol, but he didn't bother to do that and send her away. She went back to the urgent care center the following week and she was admitted to the North East Hospital. She was there for 3 days, seen by consultants, seen by registrars, junior doctors. Oh, we will do a scan for your abdomen. And discharged her. And of course she was getting worse. The mother said, I'm going to take you to Dr. Chandy, because I sometimes only work one evening or 2 evenings. So when I look through the corridor, I can see this young girl struggling to walk and tears down the eyes. I thought, my God, what has happened to her? So I was watching her, and as soon as I walked in, before she could sit down, I asked, what have you done? Have you broken your leg? No, doctor, I can't even stand. I can't put my feet down. I said, please go on to the bed. I examined her. She had no reflexes on this side at all. No pain sensation at all. Almost, she's paralyzing on the whole side. Nothing wrong with her abdomen. And they are doing an abdominal scan and waiting for that. Then I thought, Lord, how am I going to save this 17-year-old? Will I save my own daughter? Now, if I even order a blood test for B12 for her, I will be suspended. So for a minute I paused, and I had to make a decision, you see. If I send her back, the other doctors may not do the blood test, and they may miss the diagnosis. How did I know it will be B12 deficiency? Because family history is so important. Now the other doctors, you don't ask your family history at all. They straight away go on the screen and fill some forms. Oh, you got depression, have fluoxetine and go away. That's the end of the story. They don't want to look any further because it's too much problem. So I had to make a decision, even to lose my registration. And I took the blood myself, because if you wait, even lose in few hours, a person can become paralyzed, and that will be irreversible. If the axon, the core of the nerve is damaged, you can't regain it. So this is called single limb paralysis, where unfortunately it was upper limb and lower limb. So I took the blood, I wrote it up and sent it to the laboratory. Immediately I started to give her injections every day, large doses. Within 2 weeks, she was able to throw the crutches away. Otherwise, she would have been... Did you want to?
Yeah, just how big a dose?
Up to 5,000 microgram.
A day?
Yes. You can't get 5,000 microgram on the NHS. What you get is 1,000. But of course, you can add up. In a very severe case like this, vitamin B12 have no toxicity. So even large doses, if the body cannot use, it will be excreted in the urine, and you can see pink urine. That way, you are not really overdosing. And you cannot overdose with B12. B12 is just like water, harmless. But God has created this molecule to be the largest molecule. And that is one reason it has difficulty in getting to the cells. It has to go through so many hoops, as you know. But it is harmless. Anyway, I then declared that I have done this to my lawyers, who is dealing with the GMC, and I haven't heard from them. But she is well. So you can see what you are facing in the NHS. And the same thing is in other areas what Dr. Peatfield covered about the hypoadrenalism. This is what is happening, the misdiagnosis. when these important minor elements which are important are missed, then especially the B12, the thyroid, hypoadrenalism, vitamin D, then they are in a hurry to make a diagnosis of MS. That girl would have been diagnosed as MS. I say there is no multiple sclerosis. I challenge endocrinologists. So in my area, no neurologists dare diagnose MS because they haven't managed to get it off me. You see, they would have liked to. So fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, myalgic encephalomyelitis, I mean, all that is preventable. They are fancy names they have given. That girl would have got a diagnosis of functional paralysis. That means it is in the mind. Another girl whom I will show you, she was diagnosed, she had single limb paralysis in 2004 by a local neurologist as hysterical paralysis. So they have fancy names to bamboozle you and you will believe in them, you see. Right. You can see how in my practice in 2006 I did a paper and I found B12 deficient patients of 168. See the connection between thyroid? 54 patients had thyroid deficiency. Hypertension, H. pylori and diabetes is another endocrine condition. The prevalence, 80 to 20% of the population have B12 deficiency. And out of that, 80% are females. And their husbands will say, you are useless wives, you are not, doing this or that for me. But they don't realize that it is a B12 deficiency. That means a large number of female in Britain and across the world are suffering from it. In India more so, 40% WHO found out of the people. That is partly because of the vegetarianism there. You see? So there is the genetic factor, and if a family are vegetarians for generation after generation, then they will become, their mitochondria DNA is damaged, and they will become B12 deficient. You can see 47 females and 7 male. This is from my study, I have evidence. The paper I did in 2006. Nowadays, another problem is patient ring, like that lady which I read, all these confusions. Macrocytic anemia, pernicious anemia, intrinsic factor, parietal cell antibody. I don't have parietal cell antibody, the GP says, so he wouldn't give B12 injection. But her B12 level is 100. But no parietal cell antibody. All those things are not necessary at all for diagnosis. Homocysteine, MMA, not needed. Active B12, inactive B12. This is the phone calls I get. So I listen to them and then I say, don't worry, you have B12 deficiency, you just start and you will see the benefit. That is called the therapeutic trial. Now I say, in the old diagnosis was the pre-war presentation, there was the megaloblastic anemia, where you should have with iron, intrinsic factor antibody, B-cell antibodies. Then the pernicious anemia, pernicious means fatal. There again, you need to have the IF antibody and the parietal cells, low folic acid. But now I say the modern day presentation, you will not see macrocytosis. It is because our diet has improved, lifestyle has improved. So the post-war presentation, which we are seeing, is microcytic anemia. You could get B12 deficiency even with the microcytes. Then vitamin B12 deficiency with or without anemia, macrocytosis, that is subtle B12 deficiency. So post-war, there are 5 categories which we see. At the end of the day, it's all B12 deficiency affecting the neurological system and our mood. So it shows it affects every system in the body. Every system is affected. The endocrine system, as Dr. Peatfield was saying, every gland. And why is 80% are women who have more glands to contend with, who have more changes, biological changes in their lifetime. You become periods, you become pregnant, then of course you have to get back to normal. So really a huge amount of adjustment is happening in the female body. This is why you do struggle and you get tired and you have to look after the children, and then the husband comes and the tea is not ready. You see? And they blame me. So many of my patients actually, truly, the husbands come and thank me. Doctor, you gave me my wife back. She's a different girl. And I feel guilty that I was telling her off. Right. Placebo trial, Dr. Kendrick mentioned about that. In a deficiency disease, we must not do placebo trial. If I put her into a placebo trial, what would have happened to her? So it is unethical. Now then, Dr. Chandy, did you do this? Yes, I did this. Why did I do that? I was forced. They told me, stop. And I obeyed. And you can see how much better they were. And then when we stopped, they all came down. And my patients contacted the MP, contacted everybody, and there was a meeting. And after about 13 months, they allowed me to start back. So you can see, if anybody asks, have I done placebo trial? Here we are. Right. Can people die? Of course, pre-war period, people used to die. But can in this day and age, can patients die? This is the story of two sisters. You may notice the right-hand side, her B12 level was 170 something. But the other sister, who is still alive, her B12 level wasn't all that low. It was 145 hers. Yeah, she was 170. Now she initially preferred oral medication, but later on now she's on injections. Now this poor lady, when she found out she couldn't have any injection, even when finally we managed to reinstate it, she became forgetful, not responsive, so she didn't come. She developed an ordinary cold, which became influenza, and then she developed double pneumonia. I couldn't even recognize her when I went and saw her at home. She looked like a 90-year-old woman. She was only 40, the husband and a young girl. Now, I wanted to give her intravenous, large dose, but I was scared to do it. So her immune system was affected due to lack of B12. She didn't have any fight in her. 12 days later in intensive care, she died. Will the NHS answer for it? Instead of that, you can see they are referring me to the GMC. If it can happen in Libya or in other countries, or ISIS, not in Great Britain. Now, I said in the Appalachian Anemia Society meeting, it is destiny that I came to Horton. Prior to that, I worked in Brighton, one of the posh places. I like posh things. But it was my destiny. I didn't come and look at the premises or anything in the colliery village. I went for the interview in Durham, which is a nice place, and I thought, oh, this is a nice place to work. So there were 14 candidates, and I was the youngest and inexperienced. I was mainly doing pediatrics. But they gave me the job because they saw my wife, who is only 18-year-old, and carrying a little baby all the way from Accrington. We drove and came for the interview. So I said they felt sorry for me, and my wife had a baby and gave me the job. But then when I went to see the surgery, the patients are in their boots, colliery boots, and they're all smoking. The secretary is smoking, and also the doctor smoking from Scotland. Anyway, 1970, November 1970, I joined that practice. The second day, I was on duty, and I had a call in the early hours of the morning. And instead of putting the car in the garage in case another call came, I parked the car at the front road on the pavement. After half an hour, I had a big bag. My car was smashed up by a colliery lorry. And when I called him in, he said, "Doctor, I am your patient. Don't report me to the police." So that was my start in Harrogate. 15th of November, 15 days later, I get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. "Dr. Chandler, will you come and deliver my wife's baby? She's in labor. We can't get hold of the midwife." So I went there and delivered Nicola, that girl, the daughter. After that, the mother started to come and see me. Every 6 months, she would come all tired, dry hair, depressed, headache. What is going on? She's a smart lady, hard-working lady. No, is it in the mind? No, it can't be. Took the blood. I found her serum ferritin was low. She was anemic. So I asked the hematologist, "Will you please do her B12 level?" He refused to do the B12 level. Why? The old teaching, unless there is macrocytosis, large red cells, there is no B12. Can you see how wrong the old teaching is? This is what is happening to many of you. Oh, no macrocytosis, so the hematologist wouldn't do. The third time, he agreed, and he did the B12 level. And you can see her B12 level was 180 something, 185. So this is my first case of B12 deficiency diagnosis. If it isn't for that mother and daughter and asking me to deliver the baby, I wouldn't be going after B12 like I have done. So this is why I say, I think God chose a fool to take up this baton who wouldn't give up. Even if the mighty GMC or the British establishment challenged me, I wouldn't give up for my patients, as I was prepared to sacrifice everything. And also all your prayers is sustaining me, I think. Now I mentioned you about another lady similar to that. You see, notice? She was fainting. She was a very smart girl. All of a sudden she became a recluse. She wouldn't leave home, 16-year-old. And one day she was wanted a hairbrush. And she went dizzy and got hold on the cupboard. And the cupboard fell on her chest. And then it broke her ribs. Another time she was ironing. And she went dizzy and the iron fell on her breast and burned and scalded the breast, 16-year-old. So the doctors diagnosed her with epilepsy and sent her to the neurologist. And of course they couldn't find any evidence of epilepsy. So they came to see my colleague, and the colleague said, "This is too much for me, you go and see Dr. Chandy." So she came to see me, and that's the time there was another ban that I shouldn't treat. So I did the blood test, and you will see it was 247, folic acid was 3, and means MCV is 90. So have you noticed there is no macrocytosis and the hemoglobin is normal, the TSH is 2.42, but the folic acid was low. B12 was 247. They will say normal. Dr. Chandy shouldn't treat. Then I asked my wife, this is what I'm facing. If I don't treat her, I think she will develop paralysis or subacute combined degeneration. Then she said, again, will you treat if it is really ill? I said, of course, yes. By that time, when we were discussing it at home, she got admitted because she collapsed. She went into Hartlepool Hospital. She was there for 1 month. And do you know what the diagnosis by the neurologist was? Hysterical paralysis. And said, refer her to physiotherapy. She had physiotherapy for 2 weeks, and the physiotherapist wrote a letter to me, the neurologist, and all the other specialists involved. This is not hysterical paralysis. She has no sensation. I can put a pin through her leg. She has no power. This is a physiotherapist diagnosing it. So she came back. The mother brought her to see me. And then I said, I will treat her and I will make her walk. So the mother said, all those specialists who are cleverer than you, they couldn't diagnose and you're going to diagnose and make her better? I said, please give me a chance. So I started to treat her. It took me 9 months of regular injections and she was able to walk. Then what happens? Then the second stopping came. 3 years later, she went back into wheelchair. And then she developed severe neuropathic pain. All these nerves in the back wasn't getting any B12. So she was having severe pain. And how did she resolve the pain? By sitting next to a radiator. When the mother called me to look at her back, the whole back was burnt. That scarring is still there. All for 1,000 microgram B12, 1 a month. That is what they stopped. So there we are. Now, she found a nice boy, got married. Now they have 4 children. Wonderful family. I thought of even taking a photograph to show you. See how otherwise her life, she calls me Shandy. She had that much gratitude to me, she's slightly modified my name. She wouldn't call me doctor. Right, this is another story. The mother and daughter. That mother's mother and grandmother, they all used to get liver extract injections in the 1940s and all that. Of course, liver extract contains B12 and it is very painful. So you can see the family inheritance. Now, the mother was on oral B12. The daughter was having severe pain and it was diagnosed as arthritis. I said, no, this is not arthritis. Let me check your blood. And I checked her B12 level and it was 268 in 2006. So I had to refer her in those days, because it is about 200, to the neurologist. Immediately the neurologist said she's got multiple sclerosis. What is multiple sclerosis? Multiple sclerotic changes everywhere. Due to what? They don't know. And he put her on azithromycin, immunosuppressants, all toxic drugs. One day I saw her standing with 2 crutches in the bus stop. I even went to the bus stop and told her, this is not multiple sclerosis, please come. Have the injections, otherwise you will end up in a wheelchair. Oh, I'd rather believe the neurologist, not you, Dr. Chandy. Sad, she ended up in a wheelchair. Then the mother brought her, had enough. I took the blood again, and her blood level has dropped to 160. So can you see how it dropped? So if she was treated earlier, will she be in a wheelchair? Now her daughter is a nurse. She is B12 deficient. And her daughter, only 14-year-old, B12 deficient. See how now 7 generations I am treating or knowing in one family alone. That is because partly I've been in Fordham for that long. I'm able to now treat the 6th generation. So this is why I said there is no multiple sclerosis, you see. Mother and son. The father brought that little boy. Doctor, he wouldn't go out to play. The teacher is fed up with him. He will not listen. He will not attend. Oh, I see. So I just looked at him and I suspected that he has B12 deficiency just by the look. Took the blood, you will see the level there, 133 in a young boy. What would have happened to him if I didn't pick it up? Will any doctor look for suspect B12 deficiency in a little boy? He would have ended up as ADDH, attention deficit, or whatever label they can put on, so many fancy labels, and he will be on toxic drugs rest of his life. Now, he is top of the class. Then I told the husband, ask the mother to come. He must have got it from the mother. So we tested the mother, and of course her level is again there. And they also had, you may notice, folic acid deficiency and ferritin level. Ferritin level should be 100 to 200. Both their ferritin level. So when I treat B12, I look for everything. It is very important not just to do the hemoglobin and be satisfied. Where does the hemoglobin get the iron from? From the store. So not many doctors check the ferritin level. So you got to do that as well. Folic acid is very important because folic acid and B12 metabolism overlap. So I'll come to that about pregnant women only given folic acid, which is a very important thing. Right. This is a very rare case. As I said, it can affect every part of the body. Which nerve it will hit, we do not know. See, we have 5,500 patients now, so I can't see every patient. So sometimes they don't get an appointment with me. So that girl had been to see every other doctor. They have referred to every other specialty. So one day she decided somehow to come and see me. Much worse than that actually when she came. I couldn't even recognize this is Beverly. Her name is Beverly. She's a beautiful girl. And I thought, is it Beverly? Yes, doctor, I am Beverly. I said, why do you look like this? What happened? She said, for 1 year she couldn't swallow food. The glossopharyngeal nerve has paralyzed. Glossopharyngeal nerve. Without that nerve, you can't swallow. So I said, you go for bronchoscopy, but I know what's the matter with you. She asked, what is it? I am certain you will have B12 deficiency. So immediately I took the blood, sent it away, and started to give large doses of the B12 injection. You may notice her level came back at 442. Will anybody say that is B12 deficiency? Of course it is protein bound, unusable B12. It is of no use. It is not the active TC2 bound, good B12, you see. So any other doctor would have stopped giving B12 injection. So I said, no, you must continue with the injection. But when I looked at the notes, I found an old level which we have done in the other practice, 2004. It is 224. She should have been treated in 2004. See how it all fits in. But even at 224, you shouldn't treat. It has to be 148. In some areas, it has to be, you will be dying. Still, they wouldn't bother. So this is called glossopharyngitis, and this is the same lady there. After 6 months or so. Can you see? You can't even recognize. That lady, his daughter works in the palace for Princess Anne. So she became ill from early stage, and she has seen every top specialist. She had diagnosis of sarcoidosis, ME, fibromyalgia, every fancy name. She had diagnosis from London to Newcastle. So one day, that's that day, she wrote a suicide note. That same day, she was going to end it all. Fortunately, the husband came up from London and found her with this. Immediately he said, I'm going to take you to Dr. Chandy. So he brought her in a wheelchair and sat in my surgery, and I listened to this story, sad story, about all these diagnoses. Even from age 8, her iron was low in one of the top hospitals in Essex. I found in the notes the ferritin was low, but nothing else. So I listened to the whole story, and I said, I know what's the matter with you, and I will get you better and get you out of that wheelchair. You can? I said, I can. Then he said, I will call you the Jesus of Peterlee. The miracle worker. She had a sense of humor. So we both laughed. And I took the blood and started the treatment. You may notice all those diagnoses was made. Now, there was a blood test previously done in 2005 and it is 524. But it is March 08, she came to see me. The day she came to see me, when I took the blood, the level was 418. All of you will say, Dr. Chandy, that is normal. Why did you treat her? But that again, as I said, it is unusable B12. You have to look at the signs and symptoms, her presentation, her hair, and the look of her alone shows, isn't it? We doctors now give no importance to the way the patient looks, their signs and symptoms. Oh no, the blood test shows such and such. And they don't even realize that is of no use. Unusable B12. It's not active B12. It's protein, wrong protein bound. So I diagnose it based on that clinical picture. Now this is the same person after 6 months. It's almost a miracle, isn't it? And she again suffered when the PCT stopped it the second time. But she is okay now. But each time you stop, it is like pulling the carpet from under your feet. You fall back. And each time you fall back, you are getting worse. You can see how it worked in a young man who is only 30-year-old. He is so grateful for that. Right, this young lady, a lovely mother, she was told she shouldn't become pregnant because she has got very severe complex heart disease and she had operation for it. And one day she came and saw me, Doctor, I would like to have a baby, but this is what the cardiologists say. I said, looking at you, I think there is something else wrong with you. So let me do some blood for you. Again, I suspected she was B12 deficient. See, her level came back at 283. You will all say, Dr. Chandy, that is over the 200 mark, so it is normal. But of course, in a healthy person, you would expect, like they do in Japan, anything from 500 to 1,000. So they are giving B12 freely to the whole nation. That is what here we should do as well. So I started her on treatment and she felt so well. And I said, you try for a baby, now you have the strength to have a baby. And the baby will be beautiful and healthy because the mother is not only getting folic acid, but also B12. And of course, after showing the baby to the parents, who does she come to show? Me. He said it gives you so much happiness when you see such happy stories. She's a nurse and she gets a severe rash, itchy, and she cannot sleep. And she works in hospital and she's seen all the specialists. She had all sorts of things. So finally she came to see me in the morning. Immediately I suspect she is hypoadrenal. Dr. Durrant-Peatfield said, no doctor would check the cortisol level. And I suspected that her cortisol level will be low. And you can see it has 130 nanomoles per liter. It should be 500 to 1,000 in the morning in a healthy person. Hers was 130. So she also, you may notice how B12 deficiency. See how it is linked, B12 deficiency and hypoadrenalism. So I'm going to just flip through because this is a hypoadrenalism. President Kennedy was hypoadrenalism. I think here if I just read this story and just flip through, that will be the end of it. Okay. Are we supposed to treat who is not registered with you and he is a GP colleague? end-stage Addisonian crisis presentation, which again Dr. Peatfield mentioned in his talk. In January 2013, this friendly, hard-working colleague joined the existing practice of GP team of 4. GP soon, what happened was, she was very tired, she needed a nebulizer after seeing each patient, and the staff were very worried. So they came and asked me, Dr. Chandy, will you have a word with her? I listened to her story for 20 minutes, and she is attending. She was diagnosed as fibromyalgia stroke ME and referred to Royal Victoria Infirmary. And they have been looking after her for 10 years, and they haven't yet found a virus. So I said, next time you go, when are you going? Oh, Monday. Will you ask them whether they have ever done a morning cortisol level? She went and asked them. They have never checked a cortisol level, and they were all embarrassed. And they did the cortisol then and there. Do you know what the level was? 0. She could have died any minute. Now she is well and happy. So you can see, if it can happen to a lady doctor, and I am not supposed to diagnose, but again, I risked and saved her life. She was like a skin and bone, and she could hardly breathe, so she was using nebulizer with the corticosteroid in it for asthma. But it wasn't asthma. Now she's absolutely well. I'm going to go through it quickly. Right. This is the normal circadian rhythm. How it goes down at night. Your cortisol level goes down. Also your ACTH goes down to below 10. Right. This is one of my patients, and you can see how low it is. And this is the ACTH synactin test Dr. Peatfield mentioned. But the high dose synactin test is no good. It should be a low dose synactin test, because only when the 100% of the gland, at least 95% of the gland is damaged, then only the large dose synactin test works. So either it should be a low dose synactin test, but unfortunately they don't even check the ACTH. This lady's ACTH, instead of 47, was down to 3. She could have died. This is a patient. Look at the signs and symptoms. She was in a wheelchair. Now, this is my daughter. She is a lawyer from UCL College. She attended an endocrinologist in London, and I wrote the letter, and I suspected then hypoadrenalism. And he treated for polycystic ovarian disease. And then, of course, she moved up north, married to one of the local boys, and she started to deteriorate. One day, her husband called me and said, Leanne is on the floor. She couldn't even get up. When I examined her, all the muscles were wasted, and I suspected again hypoadrenalism. And all the specialists refused to diagnose her. So, that is her. And my reaction is, I chant them out like this. See, the specialists see them, and no review. They have to wait 3 months. During that time, these things happen. So, this is what I enter in the computer, so that you can clearly see how they have gone down the back. So, now I'm referred to GMC for treating and saving my daughter. That's the main complaint. Would you believe? I should have let her die. She was in a wheelchair, 2 little girls. And my wife and I had to go and do all the work and take them to school in my busy surgery. Right, that is what Paddy Peatfield showed you. He nicely described everything. These are the main signs and symptoms. The protocol says 6 stages, and some of them were in stage 4. If you don't start at stage 4, you will see, like that lady doctor, they will go into the end stage. End stage, they can die. There is no cortisol, there is no petrol in the engine. My daughter and the other girl were nearly there. Unfortunately, even my daughter is not fully better. Some of the are reversible. It's for their life. And she used to be a sportswoman, like I used to be a runner. She was. Now she can hardly walk. So some damage is irreversible. Right? I think that's it. Finished.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shandy. That was wonderful. Perhaps Afshan brings up to date with what's happening with Dr. Skinner's research that he started before he passed away. Afshan is a Director of Research and Development with Vaccine Research International, PLC. This is a charity established by the late Dr. Gordon Skinner in 1982, and is a charity which now supports her in her work as manager in both thyroid and vaccine research. Afshan carried out her master's degree and her PhD in medical microbiology under the supervision of Dr. Gordon Skinner at the University of Birmingham, where she worked with him as practice manager in his thyroid clinic since 1985, up until his untimely death almost 2 years ago. She's also worked closely with him in his dealings with the GMC, who were determined to give him a rough ride for daring to put the welfare of his patients first and foremost. Her talk is based on this work, and she will bring us up to date with both thyroid research and the World Thyroid Register. Thank you, Afshan.
Thank you very much. All right, so first of all, I'd like to thank the organisers, especially Sheila, for inviting me, because I think it's quite important that we keep in touch with a lot of our patients who used to come to see Dr. Skinner, and to let you know what we're doing, because he was passionate about what he did, and he was very knowledgeable, and he did stand up to the GMC, and it's so sad that he passed away before he had a chance to defend himself again at the forthcoming Fitness to Practice. And I have every confidence that we would have won and he would have been allowed to practice without the conditions. But sadly, it wasn't to be. But we who are left behind and who were part of his clinic are now engaged in research on all the data that we have accumulated from the patients so far. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what we're doing, what we hope to do, and our ultimate goal, which was the goal of Dr. Skinner, is actually to change the guidelines and to encourage doctors to treat patients as whole human beings and to stop this bizarre kind of obsession with numbers. And as was so eloquently demonstrated by Dr. Chandy, you need to see the patient, you need to assess them, you need to kind of ask them questions about their day-to-day lives, about their family history, and that gives you the answer. Dr. Skinner always used to say, listen to the patient and the patient will tell you. And that's what we have to encourage in the NHS now, because we're moving away from it, and sadly, it doesn't work. So, I'm not here to preach, I'm just here to say, but I suppose Dr. Skinner might have said those things. Now, the other thing is, I really feel quite humbled, because I'm sharing a platform with such eminent people. I really feel quite humbled. And I just feel terribly honoured to be here representing Dr. Skinner, because I just think I should be very proud. Right, okay. So before I start all of that, I really need to thank all the patients who have been really supportive to us as a research team now. We get lovely letters, we get cards, and most of all, we get donations, because as Sheila mentioned, it's actually called the Vaccine Research Trust. This is a charity set up by Dr. Skinner, and the charity is now supporting all of the thyroid research that we're doing. Now, your generosity has actually enabled us to embark on the very important research program, which we hope will help provide better diagnosis and treatment for hypothyroid patients who have clinical signs and symptoms, but their blood tests always are within the reference range. And I know that most of you here are actually familiar with Dr. Skinner and his work, but I just feel that for those of you who don't really know who he was and why I'm here, it's important for me to just say a little bit about him and what he did and how he came to do what he did. So Dr. Skinner was actually a senior lecturer at the medical school at the University of Birmingham for quite a long time, and his research group related to vaccine research was there, and that's where I joined his group. He was also a consultant virologist at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Now, in his capacity as a virologist, he was referred a large number of patients who were thought to have chronic fatigue syndrome, post-viral syndrome, those kind of ailments. And as he believed in proper examination of patients, he felt that a number of these patients actually had signs and symptoms which were more like hypothyroidism rather than a virological problem. So following thyroid replacement in these patients, he did recognize that a huge number of them improved. So he went on to treat a lot of these patients and got really good results. So eventually he left the university and he left the hospital and established a clinic where we saw mainly patients who were referred and they had blood tests within the reference range but had overt clinical signs and symptoms of hypothyroidism. In 2002, we actually published a report in a journal, and this was on about 250 patients that we followed from coming to the clinic through their diagnosis and treatments and follow-up. And actually it's very interesting listening to Dr. Kendrick, because we had a lot of trouble trying to get our data published. And we went to the British Medical Journal, who rejected us. We went to the Lancet, who rejected us. We went to a number of eminent American journals. They all rejected us. And these were the peer review journals, which are so important that if you publish in them, your work is thought of as being wonderful. But we did get published, and we got published in the Journal of Epidemiology and Healthcare. And I think that that paper, although it was first published in 2002, I think time will look back and say a lot about it, and say that it provided the fundamentals of what we hope will come from our research from now on. So, following Dr. Skinner's sudden passing away, we're left with a huge wealth of information on the patients that he has been seeing in his practice. We believe that no one else in the world, and we have actually been told this by a consultant endocrinologist, that there is nowhere in the world that has such detailed information on this group of patients who have normal thyroid chemistry within the reference range, but have overt clinical signs and symptoms of hypothyroidism. So for the last year, thanks to the funding from all of you and also from grants that we've managed to get, the Vaccine Research Trust is concentrating on putting all the information from 5,000 patients onto a database, and then we will embark on analysis of the database after applying for ethical permission. So although all the information that we will use will actually be anonymized, we want to do everything absolutely by the book so that nobody can ever turn around and criticize us for not doing everything properly. So we'll get ethical permission, and then the first thing we're going to address is actually safety, because the NHS and the medical world and the GMC and everyone has stressed over and over again that if you treat these people with thyroid replacement, you are actually exposing them to the possibility of heart disease, bone problems, and so on. So what we hope to be able to do, using NHS numbers of the patients that we have, is to look at hospital admissions for heart-related and bone-related problems, which we will be able to do because the NHS is putting certain systems in place where we will be able to do that. So after the ethical permission, the first thing we'll do is to look at safety. So we'll compare admissions for heart disease and bone disease in patients who were under our care and compare them with a cohort matched for age, sex, so on, and so that hopefully we'll be able to show that there might be a difference. Now, before we start, obviously, we can't say what the results will be, but after we've done that, we will then be able to look more deeply into patients who were on T4 only, T3 only, desiccated thyroid preparations only, or sometimes they were on combination. So we'll be able to relate the therapies with incidence of hospital admissions and so on. We also then hope to be able to do a follow-up paper based loosely around our first publication, which was on 250 patients, but now we should be able to do that with thousands of patients. So this is kind of our plan for the future with regard to all the publication, all the information that we have. And as I keep saying, Dr. Skinner's ultimate aim was to ensure that the diagnosis and treatment of this group of patients is changed and their lives are made better. So we will do as much as we can to make that happen. Now, the last thing is the World Thyroid Register, and I must apologize because we've been so busy trying to get money and we've been doing all this databasing and so on. I haven't really done very much on the World Thyroid Register, but basically, a number of years ago, Dr. Skinner felt that it was very important to have a website which sort of attracted people to sign on if they had any kind of interest in thyroid problems, so that we would have a kind of a group of people that we could call upon to kind of engage in certain actions. So say, for example, if we felt that it was important that lots of people wrote to their MPs to highlight the problem of this sort of particular group of patients, then we could email thousands all at the same time and say, can you please now write a letter along these lines to your MP? Or the other thing was that if there was a patient who did want to litigate against lack of proper treatment, that we might be able to email all these people and say, we can litigate, but it's going to cost so much. Would any of you voluntarily give £20 each or something like that? So hopefully once all this kind of madness with trying to do our database and all this has settled down a little bit, I'll go back to the World Thyroid Register and continue that as Dr. Skinner would have wished. I think I've said all I needed to say, apart from thanking you all very much for all that you keep doing for us and for listening today. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Akshan. That was wonderful, and I've learned a lot. I didn't realise just how much work you're actually doing. So this is wonderful for each and every one of us here today, that please know we are here and we're determined that the present status quo will not continue. We've had enough. So if anyone's got any questions, come round with the microphone.
Hirsutism hair on face, can you advise?
What did she say?
Hirsutism. Facial hair. Facial hair.
Oh, yes.
Can you advise on that? Is that to do with an androgen conversion or something? Am I losing it there?
I mean, you girls do get it, menopause, don't you, sadly? Because you may not produce as much estrogen as you used to, and you've got some progesterone and that has an androgen-like activity, so you do have that due to estrogen deficiency. But if you're on treatment, the Nutridrain or the Nutridrain Extra is likely to do it.
No solution.
Oh, I see, solutions.
Yes. Because a lot of women don't have that problem. I have a friend who has a serious issue with that.
I mean, has she done estrogen, progesterone, sex hormone level?
I don't know if she's investigated.
You usually find some imbalance. And of course, you get hair if there isn't enough estrogen and there's relatively too much progesterone or testosterone, and that has to be artificially dealt with. It's not easy at all.
And then just one more question. T1 and T2, gentlemen, I mentioned that today. I had never heard of T1 and T2 thyroid.
Well, T3 is thyrine plus 3 atoms of iodine. T2 is iodine. It is the thyrine plus 2 atoms of iodine, and T1 1 atom. And the 1 and 2 atom ones target specific tissues. I can't remember now, because I've got my book in front of me, which particular tissues it goes for, but it's at a minimum, and you usually find if the T3 is down, T1 and the T2 are down.
Right.
And there's no way of treating the T1 and T2 except by using natural thyroid. But generally speaking, if you treat the T3 properly, the other two will follow up.
Thank you.
My question is for Dr. Chandy. Dr. Chandy, could you please address, for those of us who have the MTHFR mutation and cannot use regular B12, how do we get our B12 up?
As I told you, I'm not a scientific person. Right? They are all scientific aspects you are talking about. You may notice I'm purely a clinician. So my knowledge comes from observing the patient, listening to them, and then do the run-of-the-mill normal tests which we have. And even if some of the factors are not there, you give a therapeutic trial and you improve. So I must admit, I'm not a scientific person. Having said that, what I was going to say was, you may notice in all those people, when the basic things were corrected, like, we need to have 70% of us as water. When you get old like me and Dr. Peatfield, we have only 50% of water. So there is this sort of vital things which we need to have. So people should drink at least 16 glasses of water. Otherwise, the metabolism will slow down. So I must say, in my practice, over all these years, initially, of course, I did pediatrics as well. If you do the basic simple things like drinking water, exercise, and correct food and not toxic, then we are fine. Mutation and all that is beyond me. But B12, coming to B12, some people, of course, we don't use cyanocobalamin in UK anymore. Cyanocobalamin shouldn't be used. But the B12 tablets, some of them are cyanocobalamin. And some people cannot utilize that because cyanocobalamin has to be transferred to hydroxy and then hydroxy to methyl. This is why the B12 charity mainly uses the methyl B12. What we send to patients are methyl, which is not available in the UK. So, sometimes we also send adenosylcobalamin. They are sister compounds. So we find when we give methyl, there is no problem at all in conversion and they all improve. And same way in my practice, I do use for some patients who couldn't tolerate hydroxy, I give methyl. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Dr. Chandri, thank you very much for talking to us this afternoon. Brilliant to hear you. I have a close relative who I think has vitamin B deficiency based on things she shared with me and what you've said this afternoon. How does she get an appointment to see you?
As you may have noticed, I do break rules to help people. In fact, the other day, a 17-year-old was overdosing herself, was mutilating herself, She has seen every child psychiatrist, counseling, all that. Finally, she came to the evening surgery, which I mentioned like that, and I spent nearly 45 minutes for her and convinced her she's a perfectly healthy in her mind. She doesn't need any of these antidepressants or sleeping tablets. What she needs is to heal her inner self, the body, mind, and the spirit. She used to see her father beating her mom up. Mom became an alcoholic, and she died at 53. And she felt it was all her guilt. So she was seeing in her dreams her mom in dark clothes telling her that the mom wants to kill him. So she was falling out of bed, she was having nightmares, she was self-harming, she was overdosing. A wonderful, lovely 17-year-old. So I said, what you need is a spiritual therapy. So I asked her to come with a friend or a family member, and I spent 2.5 hours talking to her, and she's completely transformed. She hasn't seen her father for 10 years. And I said, your father will come and see within 1 month. As I promised, the father came and saw her in 10 days. Now she's in Cornwall in a forest which the father looks after. So you can see the total approach, not just the B12 alone or hydrocortisone alone. You can see I help even to clear the problems of the mind. That lady who passed away, wish she was nearby and I was able to see her early. I don't think she would have done that, like, that 17-year-old. So I have this total holistic approach. Stress alone can cause damage to us. Stress alone can destabilize our metabolism. So people ask me, Dr. Chandy, you work 24 hours and you take on all these risks, and how you look so healthy and keep going. The secret is my inner self is in harmony with the world and with the Lord. So that is what, not only B12 what you need, we all need inner healing, inner wounding. And also we must be very forgiving to the doctors who have let you down. If you are angry towards the doctors, then of course that is harmful to you. So you see, am I angry to the GMC? No. So because if you are forgiving to the doctors, there will be healing in you. I hope I have answered your question. Have I? Oh, you want to see me? All right. Okay. Oh, I forgot.
Firstly.
Yeah. Okay, you can see me. If you email, the charity's email is there. If you email that, Hugo Mini will take your request and he will pass it on to me. Hugo Mini, the B12 charity. Okay.
Firstly, Dr. Chandy, very well done for carrying on with your quest to make B12 deficiency more known around the country. But I have a very specific question. Once somebody has been diagnosed with a B12 deficiency and gets injections for it, is there then any point after that still testing for the B12?
No.
Or do you just carry on for the rest of your life? Because the story I have is that a GP says you can have some injections and in 3 months we'll test you, and once your levels are up, then you can just stop again. To which I said, no, they'll be through the roof, so there's no point retesting. And he said, well, if they're through the roof, that's fine, we can stop.
They are wrong.
That's what I thought.
They are wrong. You may notice that lady, Professor Sands, Dr. Oxford, that lady whom I showed you. Have you noticed how her level was 450 and it went up to 2000 after the injection?
Yeah.
As soon as the CCG stopped it, it dropped and went down to 300.
So is there only a point in retesting once you've, for instance, been off all B12 for 6 months or so?
If it is correctly diagnosed, clinically diagnosed, there is no need to test every 3 months or every 6 months.
You just carry on with
Just carry on, and for just purely for comfort's sake, you could maybe just do a B12. Next time you are getting a blood test done, you could ask them to do the B12 and folic acid as well.
Not really, because if my GP sees that it's within range, he will stop the injections.
Yeah, that is wrong, because, like I said, they are protein bound. The wrong protein bound TC1 and TC3, that cannot be utilized at all.
Right.
Now, you can convert that. In fact, people who are hypoadrenal, like thyroxine and hydrocortisone, they also help the absorption of B12 into the cells.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
You mentioned the normal levels for B12 are between 500 and 900. Now, how would one know how much of that protein is actually bound and how much is available to the body? Does the blood test actually break this down as free B12?
We do not have an accurate test yet. This is where the active B12 test has come in. So that is being done in Germany and I think in USA. But it is done in one of the hospitals in London. But again, no need for all that. You may have noticed how simple I have made the diagnosis to be. You don't need to have macrocytosis, you don't have to have parietal cell antibody, you don't have intrinsic factor antibody, you can even have microcytosis, but if you have all those signs and symptoms, have you noticed that lady with the paralysis and all that, and family history, of course the B12 level came at 127, but you may notice the other lady whose level was 440, but her previous level used to be 4 years ago 220. Even then, that wasn't below 200.
Yeah.
So
I take your point.
Yeah.
You see, my wife suffers from what seems to be the same sort of symptoms as you point in her hip and leg. But her B12 was quite high. When she had it checked, we can't remember exactly what it was. But
Was she taking any supplements?
No. But it went up quite high when we actually started drinking raw milk. The B12, when she had a blood test for something else, we checked the B12 and it was above 900.
That means her problem is not B12 deficiency. She must have hypothyroidism, she may have hypoadrenalism, she may have low ferritin. So you need to look at those things. So is she unwell?
Are you unwell? But ask her here.
Yeah.
I'm reasonably well, but I am taking natural desiccated thyroid, and I've been better on that. But I was diagnosed with breast cancer last July, and I came off my estradiol,
Right.
and I also came off my DHEA, and both those are almost zero. And since then I've been having a lot of hot flushes, which is causing me the biggest problem is because I'm not sleeping. I'm getting saturated with wet at night, I'm feeling clothes back, I'm putting them back on again. I'm spending my night being busy, I'm not sleeping, so I think that's a lot to do with it. I'm functioning reasonably, but sometimes during the day I have little crashes. No, I've had some muscle problems and back problems, and I think I've been seeing my physiotherapist, and she's been working on my back, and I'm sort of joined by. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I had a cortisol test done in America, and my cortisol was just fractionally high around midday. Otherwise, I think it was okay. My DHEA is below the level, and my estrogen is non-existent.
I think the point you mentioned about the cortisol is important. With all those symptoms, I would do a early morning cortisol level. Also, I would do a ACTH.
Right.
At least those. Of course, the aldosterone and ACE inhibitor and all those things can be done as well. Minimum that to be done. That is early morning cortisol, stress-free. Right. You know, is stress-free produced.
Yeah,
we had a cortisol profile.
Yes.
4 points during the day, 6 o'clock, midday, 5 o'clock.
Is that the Genova test?
Yeah, similar.
Saliva test.
A saliva test.
Saliva test, yeah.
I must admit, I prefer the real blood test. Yes.
Right.
Though, yes, saliva test is okay. All those people, including my daughter, I have diagnosed 25 people in a practice. Normally, the incidence of hypoadrenalism is 6 in 100,000. And have you noticed, I have 25 patients diagnosed. out of 5,500 patients. And also consultants approved. They didn't want to, but they had to. When I produced evidence like that, they had to admit my diagnosis is correct. So really, if you are my patient, I will look at a few more things rather than rely on just one test and say, okay, go away. With all those signs and symptoms, I will not go to sleep, I will think through. This is how you diagnose. I don't just leave a patient just like that. Until the puzzle is solved, I will keep on thinking and praying. What's the clue? There is something missing. That is a sign of a sincere doctor. So your case is a little bit complex, so it deserves proper attention.
Complicated by the fact that the breast cancer's come into it, and now I'm not sure what I should be taking and what I shouldn't be taking. There's high estrogen receptors on the cancer, so immediately I was told to come off the estrogel, and immediately I started suffering bad hot flashes, which is why I went on it in the first place.
For hot flashes, there are non-hormonal agents like clonidine, 25 to 50 or even 100 milligram clonidine. That will help the hot flashes. Because of the history of breast cancer, they have stopped the estrogen. That is the reason. So clonidine is something you could try. Clonidine.
I haven't tried that.
If you contact me and give me a summary, then we will be able to email and help you.
Thank you. Well, let's somebody else.
Somebody at the back here.
My question is for Dr. Peatfield, please. Dr. Peatfield, you mentioned that for adrenal problems, sugar was also required. And if you've been diagnosed with candida, you're advised not to eat sugar. Can you please comment?
Well, I don't expect you to eat sugar, but you must have some, obviously. When you've got candida, it's always impossible to stop it altogether. How bad is the candida? How good is the treatment you're having?
Varies. I think it's improving as the candida, but I eat virtually nothing with sugar in it at all. Obviously carbohydrates, but nothing with sugar in. And I just wondered if that could be a problem.
I don't think it's a problem. Sometimes you don't have very much. I mean, everybody has to have some sugar. You can't help it in your food. But obviously you have as little as you can.
So how much is actually required for the adrenal gland to work? How long is a piece of string?
I'm not sure I can answer that. All I'm saying is the adrenal glands require a sort of general, normal sort of input of all your foodstuffs, and some of it's bound to be a bit of sugar. But I don't think it's a problem as far as your candida is concerned. You just have whatever you normally have, and the adrenals will take what sugar they need from other sources.
So you don't think it's important that it affects the candida at all?
Not particularly, no. There's protein and fat which sugar can be made from, and then that's the adrenals can run on.
Okay, thank you very much.
First, just as a general comment, I'm a bit disappointed with this conference because just outside the door it says there's going to be strobe and laser lighting and a smoke machine. So far, all I've seen is a laser pointer. So that's just not good enough. But my question is, if you've got somebody, I'm asking this on behalf of my mum, who's not been diagnosed enough thyroxine, when she's not, she's got all the symptoms of not having enough, and our only recourse has been to self-medicate by getting some more overseas and get her up to the level where she is now getting enough and hair is now growing again, and she's not getting all the symptoms that she used to have. What, if anything, should you say to your GP about that situation? Should you mention it at all, or what should you do?
Depends how you get on with the GP, what he thinks about it. If he thinks you haven't got thyroid problems, and you know that you have, saying something to him will just provoke a row. And lots of people just treat themselves, because the doctors may not be at all interested and start preaching about osteoporosis and heart attacks and all the rest of it. It's best not to have a row. And you can get natural thyroid, and if it works, there's no need really to say anything very much.
Okay, thanks.
I'd just like to say that we have on our website a draft letter that you can actually send to your doctor in such a situation as you've just mentioned. Doctors do actually pay more attention to the written word, especially if you ask for that letter to be placed into your medical notes, because they know at some future date if something goes wrong and they have not picked it up and they have not listened to the patient, then they could be the subject of an official complaint. So actually putting things in writing to your doctor, asking specific questions, telling them exactly what tests you want done. You find all of these on our website. And tell the doctor, that you want answers to these. It will give you better results than actually sitting in an office. So I would really advise about that.
So is there any mileage in that case if you are doing better on your self-medication? Should you sort of keep records of that? Is there any mileage in doing that and saying we're getting doing better in these ways when she's on more or is the mileage in that? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the more that you can get down in writing so that you have got a record of what is actually making her better, what's making her worse, then you've got to let your doctor know this. And if a doctor tells you thyroid problems, you don't have one, your results are perfectly normal, just don't put up with it. It's nothing to do, these results are bits of paper that they give you. They pay no attention to your signs, your symptoms, and you've got to make them. And if they're not prepared to do it, then again, in writing, ask for a referral to an endocrinologist, but preferably an endocrinologist of your choice, because I think nearly all endocrinologists, their specialty is diabetes. And it is getting so frightening for doctors now to give a diagnosis and start treatment. They will run a million miles away not to do this. And this is why I said earlier, they'll give you a diagnosis of ME, CFS, FM, functional somatoform disorder, whatever. All of these, they are not a diagnosis, they are symptoms. And the majority are symptoms of hypothyroidism. So be assertive and just let your GP know you're not putting up with his dismissal.
Question for Dr. Chandy. We understand that low levels of intrinsic factor can affect the absorption of B12. How much of an issue is this?
It is good to have intrinsic factor. If you don't have intrinsic factor, of course, then you get food cobalamin absorption problem because it cannot break up. Even if you break up the food and the B12 is come out, you need the intrinsic factor to get hold of it. So then you develop food cobalamin deficiency. This is where then you need injection form. So the intrinsic factor as well as gastric cells damage, acid and pepsin need to be produced to break up the food, and then you need the intrinsic factor to get hold of it from the ileum, and from there it is absorbed into the blood. So if you have problem with intrinsic factor, then of course, then you need injection. But what I find is, in the early days, I used to do the intrinsic factor, and I found that is intrinsic factor antibody. I believe the antibody will only develop in a late stage, end stage. It is in that end stage, the old pre-war diagnosis were taken. Now we are able to diagnose in the early stage and treat. And I believe some of the damage can be reversed in the gastric mucosa. That also I am finding B12 can repair many things. Asthmatic patients who are B12 deficient, when you give B12, their asthma eases off. It's amazing what B12 does. But of course you have to look at thyroid and adrenal and all that, which now I do. In the early days I thought B12 alone is sufficient. Then I found even after B12 treatment, some of them in some areas are not well. This is when I started to look at other things. So in medicine, if you take interest in patients, you learn all the time things which are not in the book. Again, parietal cell antibody, we don't do at all. Intrinsic factor antibody is more relevant. But you do not see many intrinsic factor antibody anymore. That's a way to diagnose that they are intrinsic factor deficient.
Thank you.
Oh, hello. This is for Dr. Peatfield, please. You said that things like Nutrigen or Adrenal Plus and things were fine for people to use with high cortisol and low DHEA. If you're only on T3, you said you have to come off for about 14 days and try and build up. If you're on T3, how do you do that? If you're not T3 only, how could I start to introduce the adrenals if I'm on T3 only?
T3 only has got a very short life,
Yeah.
about 8 hours or so. So the considerations that make you come off the T4 don't exist. So I'd simply have a day or so off and then start your adrenal support.
Sorry, do what, sorry?
I'd have a day or so off.
Day or two off, right.
And then start the adrenal support. The risk always of having too much thyroxine in your system suddenly being fired up by your adrenal support is that you get a temporary overdose. But that won't happen if it's only going to last a few hours in the system.
Right, okay, thank you.
My question's for Dr. Peatfield. I've been taking Armour Thyroid now for about a year now, and the last time I had my blood test checked, my TSH was still high. Does that mean I'm taking the wrong dose?
It might well do. It might mean that you're not absorbing it properly. It depends. You've been on Armour for a year, you say. How much better are you?
I do feel probably about 70% better, but I still have symptoms of hypothyroidism.
What sort of temperature and pulse are you running at?
I have a lower pulse and a low blood pressure. I feel very cold all the time.
Well, darling, do we know about your adrenals?
Yes, I took the adrenal supplements for a while, but I felt like I was getting palpitations.
Well, darling, that's because they were making the thyroid work better.
Okay, so that's normal. Because every time I get palpitations, I kind of get a little bit afraid, so I stop. So.
Well, I suggest you do have an adrenal issue, and you could check that out with Genova, couldn't you? And then decide that you should have a little bit of adrenal support. You probably don't need very much, and the Nutriadrenal plain one might be enough. Then you can stop the Armour, the natural desiccator, for a few days while you fired your adrenals up with the Nutriadrenal, and then restart it. What you're telling us is that the natural desiccated thyroid isn't actually working as well as it should. If you increase the dose, it may still not work very well, and you may still not be very much better. So it's worth checking out your adrenals first, because it does sound to me as if you've got an adrenal issue.
Okay. I have a second question. I took some coenzyme Q10, and I felt again that I was more tired. So do you think that that's because of the adrenal sufficiency again?
If you didn't feel very good on the coenzyme Q10, don't persist with it. But if you are, I mean, how many marks out of 10 are you for wellness as you sit there?
I'd probably say 7.
What's 7?
It varies. Some days I feel better than others.
These usually indicate that you have good adrenal days and bad adrenal days, and that they need to be at least helped a bit and stabilised a bit. And then you probably make better use of your thyroid, bring yourself up to 9 or 10 out of 10. If you've been on it a year and you are only like you are, there's a problem. You might benefit from having more, but I suspect you've got an adrenal issue, which is what I was talking about.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, a message for Dr. Chandra. Do you feel that astrology has a part to play in complementary medicine in the future?
That's a difficult one.
Because I was hearing you talking about healing and things.
Yeah, I do it in a very subtle way. I think the patients can sense when a clinician is really sincere and care for them. When you treat somebody with the love, true love of God, they can feel it. You see, that 17-year-old wanted to see me again and again, and she has seen all the specialists, all the nurses, but she said to the consultant, I want to see Dr. Chandy, because I spent time and if the surgery is delayed, it doesn't matter. That person who's sitting in front of you is important. Instead of that, sometimes we doctors go on the computer, don't even look at the patient. You see, so yes, those people, when you really, a doctor's job, it says in Ecclesiastical 38 that the doctors are created by God, they are blessed by God, and they are given wisdom by God. And the medicines are created by Him for that doctor to use it. So really, nowadays, doctors have lost that. You know, this is something spiritual,
yes.
What they are doing. So with that, healing comes. You see, the mind, body and spirit need to be in harmony.
I was just referring to the MP not so long ago that was saying that we'll cure the national with astrology, and that he was laughed at was the MP. But the astrological chart is like a blueprint of one's life.
It's all linked.
It is all linked.
It is all linked.
It's all linked.
Yes, I agree. So we need to be in harmony with the nature.
That's right.
And who is nature? God. Exactly, we need to be in harmony. So a doctor needs to be in harmony with him. And it is with his love he approaches the patient. And there alone healing comes. So you don't need antidepressants. You know, all those things are nonsense. I hardly prescribe them.
Quite agree. Thank you.
Hello, I'd like to ask Dr. Chandy a question, please. I'm taking... Can you hear me, Dr. Chandy?
No.
I'm taking metformin for diabetes, diabetes type 2, and it says on the leaflet that it is likely to reduce your vitamin B12, to rob you of your vitamin B12. So I've been taking vitamin B12 by mouth. Taking extra,
by mouth?
Yeah, tablets, you know, supplements.
Yes.
Do you think that's a good idea? I can get supplements at 100 micrograms or at 1,000 micrograms, or I can get these under the tongue supplement. I wondered if you approve of those.
You're quite correct, yes. Metformin can activate the absorption of B12, so you must take B12 supplements. If your diabetes is well managed on the current treatment, metformin or Amaryl or whatever you have, then yes, the best one is the lozenges you just mentioned.
The under the tongue?
Under the tongue, because they are methyl. That's purer form, and that is straight away absorbed into the blood. And some of them do have also folic acid as well as vitamin C with it. So that is good for you. So please continue.
Which acid was that? Sorry. Tell me again.
Please.
Folic acid, yes, folic acid.
Folic acid, yes.
Acid.
There is a site, www.foryourhealth.co.uk, for your health. There it will come up as superior B12.
Thank you.
That contains the methyl B12.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
All right.
Just a question for Dr. Chandy. As a GP in the NHS, what are you legally allowed to prescribe on what, you know, your ranges that you use without getting into trouble?
Are you talking about B12?
Yeah, yes. Or would you advise patients to buy their own?
The British National Formulary, what they have prescribed is not sufficient for everybody. This is why I have developed this new patient leaflet, which I left it for you. And there I have very bravely now says what you should do. You must take it one alternate days, 1,000 microgram, until, say for example, that lady with paralyzed, BNF says 6 injections and then go for 3 monthly. Or if you have neurological signs, then that patient can have 2 monthly. That will not reverse in 2 weeks, that young lady. So for her, I decided what to give, which was large doses, alternate days, until she got out of the wheelchair and walked. that is the criteria. He should put patients first and break the guidelines. Nowadays, doctors are afraid to break the guideline. You are right. Only fools like me do this.
But is it a problem for the GPs? Would they refuse to give you cytamine injections?
Right. Neocytamine we don't use now.
No.
Hydroxycobalamin they can use. And many doctors are afraid. And even they are not following the British BNF guideline.
Okay.
So there is a lot of ignorance. This is the reason why I haven't retired and staying in and spreading the news, spreading the good news. And of course it's totally evidence-based, you've seen it.
Yeah,
I have the evidence.
I'll take all your evidence and present it to the GP then.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thanks very much everybody. I think that's the end. Just like to thank everybody for coming, and I hope you, like I said at the beginning, that you've managed to take away something of what you came to look for. Do fill your forms in, because these are important, and leave them on the table and we'll pick them up. And just hope you all have a very safe journey back home, and thanks very much for coming.